Ooh, that was new.
Very nice.
Do we have a new system?
I don't know. I've never heard that before.
We
I
do.
saw it. It started doing that after your last meeting, David. I noticed it.
Ah,
Another one.
it's fancy.
So I have an option of leaving the meeting.
You don't want to be recorded.
Yeah. Not consent to that.
Hey guys, how's everyone doing?
Hey, Erica.
Hey, Erica.
How are you?
I'm good. We're ready to get started?
Yes, I think I've let everybody in who's going to be speaking.
Okay.
And then I just hit record, so I think anytime we're ready to go.
Okay. Well, good evening and welcome to the June 7th, 2021 meeting of the City of Charleston's Design Review Board. My name is Erica Chase, the board's chairperson. The members of the board with us tonight are Jeff Johnston, Dino Sliolio, Andy Smith, and Kristen Krause. Members of city staff present are David Meeks, Tori Parrish, and Andrea DeRungs. We do not have any board members that are recused from any items tonight, and we do not have any items that have been deferred. The order of the meeting will be as follows. David will give an introduction and context for any new projects. Then the applicant team will have 10 minutes for their project presentation. We are a little bit flexible being that we are virtual with the 10 minutes, but if you need time well beyond 10 minutes, if you could please let me know at the start of your presentation. All presenters should clearly state their name for the record. And then we will open up the meeting for board questions. And then we will open up the meeting for public comments. Public comment time will be also limited to 10 minutes. And if everyone that is speaking during the public comment period, please state your name and address for the record. David will then give city staff recommendations. Then the applicant team may respond or clarify to any of the public comments or city staff comments. That will have a 5-minute time limit. Then we will go into board discussion, board motion, and a vote. During this time, the applicant team may only speak when recognized or asked by a board member, and otherwise may only speak if asked a question by any of us. Please, if you could silence all cell phones or any devices that will be making noise in the background. I do want to remind everyone that comments from the public are limited to site design and architecture only. Our board does not have authority over zoning issues, building density, flooding, or traffic. David, if you could go to the virtual meeting protocol.
Oh, sure. I'm sorry. Give me 1 second here. I need to get to the file. 1 second, please. Trying to navigate on the screen.
No problem. I can start reading it. I have it printed out in front of me.
1 second.
Specifically with still being in virtual meetings, these next items are just specific to the virtual meeting protocol. David will be controlling the PowerPoint presentation, which includes everything submitted by the applicant by the deadline in accordance with the submittal requirements. Applicants will need to ask him to advance to the next slide during your presentation. Applicants, staff, and board members are required to give their name whenever speaking. The video and microphone have been disabled for all attendees. Attendees will only be given the capabilities to speak when they are called on during the public comment period. The chat and Q&A functions have been disabled for everyone. With regard to public comments, the applicant and the public have been required to register, indicate the project they wish to comment on, and submit any documents in advance of the meeting. Just as an in-person meeting, all applications heard today are part of a public meeting format. If you have registered and will speak during the public comment portion of the meeting, you will need to state your name and address for the record. The members of the public that have registered will be called in order by project. Members of the public that speak are encouraged to remain in the meeting for the completion of the item they have commented on. I will call on the registered members of the public to speak for each project. Unregistered members of the public who raise their hand will not be called on. Staff will be issuing meeting results, including staff comments and the board motion, to the applicant following the meeting. Results will also be posted on the city website shown on the screen right now. And then for additional information, there's an email address and a website on the screen also. And I do want to remind everyone that this meeting is being recorded. So with that, we will get started with item number 1, 334 Folly Road, requesting conceptual approval for a new gas station, car wash, and convenience store.
Thank you, Erica. Just a couple context slides before we turn it over to the applicant. This shows the location, 334 Folly Road. And then there's a little closer view. It's at the corner of Tatum and Folly, and it's adjacent to McLeod Plantation here. And then this is a closer view. The board had seen this already and had approved the demolition of these structures. And then just some views into the site. This is looking down Tatum and then looking south on Folly. Another view with a few of the buildings to the south of the gas station, which have been approved for demolition already. And then this is standing on Tatum looking towards Folly Road. You can see how close the first residence is to the site. And then this is just a little closer to Folly Road and looking into the site. With that, I'll turn it over to the applicant.
Afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. I'm Chris Friend. I'm with Graham Group Architecture. And I'm here to present a different design than what you saw before. David, if you could advance to the third sheet.
Sure.
These are some more site photos similar to what David just showed you all. You got an aerial view of the site and a little bit of the buildings that are across the street. If we can go to the next one. More of the same, what the site looks like currently with the fence on it. Different angles from Tatum and from Folly. Next sheet. These are the structures that have already been approved for demolition. Which I think we could probably skip past most of that,
Sure.
given that you've seen it.
Yeah.
If we'll go to sheet number 12.
Unfortunately, it's not numbered the same as when you sent it to me.
You're right there.
Okay.
Back up one. Yep, that's it right there. This is the site plan that we would prefer. I understand that there were comments from the previous submittal, but I'll try to explain the preference for both the orientation of the building and of the car wash. It is preferred that the building face the fuel canopy. The entrance, which is right now on the Folly road side of the front facade, to the right of that is where the service counter is, with windows that they can look out to the gas canopies and kind of monitor what's going on there. And it's a little bit easier for the people at the gas canopies if they want to run inside real quick for a drink or something, just to access the building. There is a side entrance also on the east elevation. The orientation of the car wash, I understand, is a little bit of an issue, but the problem we're having with the site is that they have a license plate reader for the car wash if you purchase a membership, and that reader has to be located 30 feet away from the opening of the car wash bay. Turning the building, rotating it. If you go to the next sheet, David, rotating it in this manner didn't really allow for us to separate that 30 feet and then have vehicles stacking up. It's just, it could cause congestion and circulation problems on the site itself. The other issue with this changing the long facade or the length of the building to be parallel to Folly Road, the side porch on the north facade along Tatum kind of encroaches into the sidewalk in the right of way there. Um, One of my understanding it was that, and David mentioned this meeting when we had a phone conversation the other day, was that the board would like to see a porch along the Folly Road facade. We have a side porch that's on the other facade right now, and we've decided that it might be better if we mirrored the building. That would actually put the main entrance more centered on the fuel canopy, and also would put the side entrance for pedestrian access from the sidewalk on Folly Road. We could maybe move into the elevations and renderings and cover drawings, David. Yeah, we'll start here.
Okay.
The concept for the building was, not necessarily to be a low country derivative, but certainly have some of that vocabulary in the details. With the low sloping roof for the porch, dormers, shed dormers, things like that. Try to keep it fairly simple in form, but functional and attractive. You'll go to the next one, please, David. It'll show the kind of other views of it. There's also a porch along the back of the building. So that'll be more for employees. Mirroring the building too will also allow easier access from this rear entrance to the dumpsters, which I think would probably be preferable. You'll go to the next one. This is kind of its relationship to the fuel canopy. And then you can see the car wash there in the bottom. The next page gives you an idea of the materials we're using: fiber cement siding, brick water table, wood for the shed roofs, exposed rafter tails. I do understand that we're in a fire district, so I might have to make a few changes to the rafter tails on the shed dormers. Those probably end up being boxed in. We'll advance to the next one. Let's go ahead and look at the color stuff. Actually, the next one's the car wash. And before I go into this, we'll present some better 3D renderings for the next submission. The person we used to do the color renderings was going on vacation the day that I asked him to do it, and he wasn't going to be back for 2 days. We used a program in-house, and it kind of washes out some of the details a little bit. But the first one was just kind of an aerial view of the site, what it would look like in relationship to some of the other buildings around it. The next one here, you're turning off a Tatum onto the property. And that's from the corner of Folly and Tatum. And this is coming up Folly Road. And that's the drive off of Folly Road there. You can see kind of some of the mass of the buildings on the other side of the street. Another shot from Folly. This is going south on Folly. You can kind of see the car wash there a little bit. We're trying to screen it as well as we can with landscaping. And there's another view. And this one's as you pulled onto the property. Excuse me. And then that's just upstream closure. Fuel canopy drawings, excuse me.
Okay.
I don't know if Michael wanted to, the civil engineer wanted to add anything.
No, not really. This is Michael McCormick, the civil. The biggest thing I can see is we've added screen walls all the way down Folly right away on each side of the drive. And the proposed driveway location on Folly Road is, it can't move. It's got to be centerlined on the Synovus curb cut across Folly Road as a part of the TIA and TNT at the city. So that kind of that's a fixture. We just got to overcome the screening of the tunnel that is desired. That's all I have.
Thank you. Any questions from the board?
I had a couple of questions, just curious about a couple things.
Okay.
Who maybe describe the use of the porches, and there's two porches. So one, that site plan was actually worked quite well, I think. The porch that's on the corner of Folly and Tatum, who uses that? What
That'll be for, well, one, it was more to give it a more consistent look on the rear of the building so that it doesn't look like the rear of the building. But that'll be employees coming and going,
And
which is one of the reasons we've decided mirroring the building so that porch is actually going to be along or adjacent to the drive at Tatum instead of on the corner of Folly and Tatum. We think that might be a better placement for the porch on that side.
can you say that part again, Chris? I'm sorry.
It's okay. I'm sorry. I've got a little bit of tick going on in my throat here. Okay. So the rear porch that's at the corner of Folly and Tatum right now, it has a side entrance for the back room of the facility, the utility room, and that's for the employees. After some discussion, after we submitted this, we thought that mirroring the building so that that porch was where the side parking is, where it comes off of Tatum right there, might be a better arrangement of the building.
So in this plan, mirroring it left to right.
But yeah, that's correct. That also puts, because on that side parking, there's a side porch there. And mirroring will also put that side porch on Folly Road. And that would allow for some tables to be put along there.
Along Folly.
Yeah. Mhm.
Okay. Just trying to, we're doing kind of a little bit of archispeak here. And
Yeah.
Imagine, if you will, the building were mirrored. So it's helpful to kind of walk through this.
Yeah. And Chris, this isn't Narciso, but to add to that, mirroring it, there's a side door there into that side porch. So it would allow for pedestrian access directly into that door coming off of Folly Road.
Correct.
Got it. Okay. I think that would be a good suggestion. Okay, let's talk about the porch that is now fronting the parking lot.
Okay.
Maybe how many doors?
Along that front facade, there's just one door, and it's a sliding door.
And on this plan, where would that be? Is it on the?
You see the two knot bumps out right there?
Yes.
Yeah, that's it. It'd be right there. So mirroring it again would put it more kind of towards the corner.
So that wraparound porch that's on this elevation, that's on the page south and page right.
Yeah.
Page east, along that whole wraparound porch, the only door is right there between the two bump outs.
No, you have two doors. You've got one where the bump is out is, and then on the side porch, there's a door there too.
Okay, all right.
That's the door that we would flip and rotate or mirror so that it would be on Folly Road.
Okay, got it. And then another question is the width of that sidewalk along Folly. Does that comply with the Rethink Folly multi-use pathway?
Michael?
Yes, it's 12 feet wide. That's a requirement.
Great. That's the questions I had.
Okay.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hey, Chris, this is Dinos, Leo. Let me make sure I understand when y'all were talking about mirroring the building.
Mhm.
So in essence, the footprint would basically stay the same, but what you're talking about is basically just flipping so that what is now showing up on the west side would be the east. Is that correct?
Correct. Absolutely
Okay.
correct. Yes.
Okay. Couple of questions on the, well, I'm going to go with this elevation and this print right now.
Mhm.
If I look at the floor plan, David, can you flip to the floor plan for a moment? Thank you, my friend. The area that's shown is the beer cave and all of this area in here. You're showing some rather significant glazing
Yes.
and storefront. Is that spandrel glass? Is that clear glass? What?
It's not spandrel glass, but it'd be clear glass, and then we put a 3M film over it, so it makes it almost semi-translucent. At the beer caves, it won't be visible because there won't be any lighting. The same thing goes for the dormer windows also.
Okay, so let me ask you then. Basically, it's a facadal treatment.
Yes, sir. That's
Okay,
correct.
and the dormer windows was a great second question that I was having. Do these dormers interact at all with the interior of the space?
No, they don't. No, they don't.
Okay. I see that you went from a 9-inch to a 5-inch lap siding as you go to the top. I mean, is there a reason for that?
Just a material change, just a subtle material change.
Okay. Um,
Initially, we had board and batten on there also,
okay.
and we had shared our drawings with the city architect, and she recommended some changes, and we agreed with her recommendations, so we made them.
Sure. And I'm sure there were excellent recommendations.
They were. We lowered the pitch and the brake returns, give it a more historic profile.
Let me ask you about the, and I was trying to find them. When I looked at the elevations, I was confused with the downspouts. Do they go back to the wall? How are those downspouts
Well,
particularly?
you have downspouts along the porches, which go back to the column. The ones along the rear of the building go back to the wall.
On the rear of the building where you have the porch, they go
Right,
underneath and back to the wall.
No, not back to the wall. Porches, all the porches just return to the columns or the posts.
Okay, so the downspouts go down the posts.
Yeah. There are some along the back facade where we have scuppers, and they just come down onto the roof below it, and then off of that porch roof, there's the gutters.
Okay. And I guess my last question is this: the canopy,
The fuel canopy?
the fuel canopy.
Yes.
What was the inspiration behind that?
I don't know the answer for that. That was something that existed with Refuel before I became involved with them. I've never asked that question.
Mhm.
I do believe it was 2 ways, possibly. I'm not 100% certain about that. But we try to tie in use the same brick around the columns and same metal roof.
Okay, and just one other question. On your landscape plan, L1, I think it's L1, by the car wash, you show tanks. Are those below grade, above grade?
I think they're, I don't know, Narciso, do you know?
The tanks next to between the canopy and the car wash are the underground storage tanks. So
Okay,
they'll be underground, but they put them off into the green space. So like the sump covers and things like that don't get knocked down or aren't subjected to vehicular traffic. So you run into less environmental compliance issues.
mhm. All right. And I was going to ask Chris one other question.
Okay.
When you came, have you been to the site?
Yes, sir. I have.
What was anything particularly inspirational from a design standpoint, from a context standpoint, that you felt prevalent?
We actually truthfully had already been working on the design.
Prior to coming to the
Prior
site?
to this, yeah, we've been working on, we had the floor plan and used the floor plan with a different facade up here in the Myrtle Beach area. And Refuel asked us to redesign the exterior for various other markets outside of the Pawleys Island, Myrtle Beach area. So we came up with several different versions, and this is one of them, and that we've continued to develop a little bit.
So
But
this
we
is a
felt-
prototype?
Well, it's not a prototype per se, but it's
Yeah.
we have other versions.
I guess you can say that the floor plan layout of the store is kind of the prototype part of
Yeah.
that. I think what Chris was saying is he's worked on various different exterior elevations to kind of go with some of the areas that Refuel is developing in.
Okay.
So this one kind of seemed with,
most appropriate for that site.
yeah, with especially with the feedback with the pedestrian connectivity and those conversations that were occurring through the last DRB, this one kind of seemed the most appropriate for this location.
Well, thank you. And Erica, that's all the questions I have.
Anyone else?
Erica,
Yes.
I just want to mention to you the first person on speaking for this project, Mr. Scarborough, emailed shortly before the project, and he said his concerns have been satisfied. He no longer needs to speak.
Okay, great, thanks. So with no other board questions, we will now open up the meeting for public comment. There were 2 members of the public registered to speak. It sounds like one has been satisfied and no longer on the call. So Mr. Joe Rosito.
Oh, let me make sure I have let him in. Give me 1 second.
Hey, can you all hear me now?
We
Okay.
can, thank you.
Hey, this is Joe Rosito. I live next door at 1637 Tatum Street. I have a couple questions, if I may, around the car wash. I think last time we talked about some of my other concerns around the lighting and the landscaping, but this one in particular, what direction is that car wash? Where's the entrance and the exit? Is it west to east or east to west?
Mr. Rosito, if you could just go through all of your questions, and then at the end of your questions, once the public comment period is closed, the whole team will be able to answer them all. Just from a formality standpoint, we can't allow a dialogue, so I
Sure.
apologize.
Sure, no problem. So
Thank you.
my questions are around direction of that car wash and the decibel output. Do we know if the direction and what the decibel is at like 30 feet, 10 feet, 50 feet? My main concern is the blowers on the exit side of that car wash, being that my property is so close adjacent that, concerned about the decibel level of cars and traffic going through there. But I will say that this position, I know it maybe is contrary to the board's wishes, but I prefer this position much better than the position where the entrance and exit are parallel to my property line. I think this sets back the car wash a little further. And other than that, those are my only concerns.
Thank you. So with that, the public meeting, the public comment period is closed, and we will now move on to staff recommendations. And then after staff recommendations, the applicant team will have a chance to respond to Mr. Rosito's questions, and then anything brought up in the staff comments.
Thank you, Erica. So staff comment number 1, the height scale mass of the convenience store is appropriate for this location and in keeping with the surrounding area. Number 2, staff finds this design direction of the main building a big improvement over the first submittal. This design has a low country feel with metal roof, shed dormers, roof overhangs, and brackets. This will be a nice fit for the area. Number 3, staff supports the design direction of the gas canopy, which is attractive, and the car wash, which is simple and nice. Number 4, staff and the board had recommended the long side of the building to face Folly Road with porches on the Folly side for patrons to use. One option was shown with the long side of facing Folly Road, which is the north elevation in the drawing set, is what would face Folly. It is a more attractive elevation and has a porch. However, nothing on the interior of the building was changed for this option, nor the entrances moved, which makes this option, as the applicant has shown, not feasible. Currently, the west elevation being proposed for Folly Road has no porches. This elevation proposed to face Folly Road looks to be the least attractive elevation with blackout windows and a utility door. It appears that the internal layout of the prototype can't be changed and is dictating the building orientation. Staff comment number 5, staff recommends flipping the main building. So the floor plan, main building floor plan so that the east elevation becomes the west and vice versa. This puts the porches on the Folly Road side of the building and the utility door on the east side away from Folly Road. Number 6, staff prefers the site plan, which has the car wash opening not facing Folly Road, but the exit route turn looks to be too sharp and there's no room for car stacking with this option. Consider angling the car wash building 45 degrees for stacking cars. This would prevent a full view into the tunnel. If not possible, staff is okay with this orientation presented. If the applicant can bend the exit drive more to get more plants proposed to screen the opening better from Folly Road. Also consider a screen wall to help block the view into the tunnel. Number 7, please include the floor plans, minimum doors and windows on the site plan and landscape plan. Please include the porch overhangs versus the building footprints. Number 8, on sheet A 5.0 to A 5.2, please label the renderings, the directions the elevation is facing, or provide a key showing which way one is viewing the images. Number 9, applicants are showing the required 12-foot multi-use path along Folly, which is good. Staff does recommend deferral based on the comments above. I have a few further comments for the applicant to address before preliminary review. The 3D renderings provided convey height scale mass, which staff approves of, but the images are too washed out and pale to see any detail. Please adjust to make the details clearer. Providing shadows would also help. On number 11, typically DRB asks for a brick screen wall around gas stations. The applicants are showing a white wood-like fence. Staff could be open to this concept as it fits nicely with the architecture. Staff asks that the material used be durable and high quality. Further study is requested. Another option is to consider brick piers with the wood fence screening that you're showing. Number 13, staff does not recommend long grass in the strip between the parking and the main entrance, as it will be difficult to maintain. Staff recommends using pavers in this area and leave openings for the palms that you're showing. Number 14, a photometric plan is required at preliminary review. We ask that special attention be made to the neighbors to ensure that very little to no light is spilling off the site, especially to the east and to the south. And that's all I have for staff comments.
Thanks, David. Chris or anyone of the team, do you have any response to public comments and or staff comments?
I think I can address all of them.
Great, thank you.
Or most of them. Some of the site stuff, Michael may need to step in. But Joe, his comment about the direction of the gas station, you enter on the east side, so on the side that is adjacent to Joe's properties, where you enter and you exit on the west side at the Folly Road exit there. I'm not aware of what the decibel level is, but maybe I could find that out. As far as mirroring the building, I think we're on board with that. I think that it would be preferable for everybody, including the board. And I think it'll function better on the site. So I don't think there's a problem there. I can discuss with my team different materials for the fence, whether it be brick piers like David suggested, or even a brick fence or a half wall with wood on top of it, or whatever. I think we're open to suggestions there. As far as the orientation of the gas station, we could try to maybe angle it or something so that to drive the exit is a little bit obscured, and try to screen that a little bit better with some more landscaping and possibly a wall that's closer to it. If we have a tree that's right along that southern facade that's can't be removed, and we can't be within a strip line, which is somewhat dictating the position of the building, of the car wash. And there's also some drainage requirements along there, which Michael can address. Does anybody else have?
No, I mean, this is Michael. We could certainly take a look at rotating that car wash to alleviate some concern there. But between the car wash and the property line, we're going to have a water quality swale there. I believe there's a couple protected trees that we've got to stay away from, and so forth. But we'll make every effort to do it.
Okay. Thank you. With that, we are now in board discussion and a motion.
This is Dinos. I guess I'll jump in first. I think the issue, the struggle that I'm having is not unlike some of the initial design that we saw a few weeks ago. I think the key issue is editing and simplifying the design. I think one of the more successful buildings on site is actually the car wash. It's simple, it's clean, it's cleanly detailed. I struggle with the facadal applications, particularly dormers that don't do anything, storefront that is there purely for a facadal treatment. I think with effort, there can be some very interesting resolution. I draw the attention back to the McLeod plantation, and particularly the former slave cabins and even the plantation house. They're so simply stated, so simple in the manner that they present themselves. I'm struggling with the brick base. I would really encourage the omission of the brick base on the building, and just make a decision on whether you want to go with 9-inch or 5-inch siding. The 9-inch actually looks proportionate to the building structure. And again, I would just simplify it. And if the dormers are purely facadal again, I would eliminate them and look for another solution. Save your client, save the client the money, and just be more honest and with the design. The mirroring of the building, I think, is an excellent suggestion. I think that would help significantly as you go forward. Again, I think the question on the mansard that is going around the building, I'm wondering if that's just not a very simple parapet, and begin to, again, to move toward more editing of the design and just simplifying the project as a whole. Those are my thoughts.
This is Jeff. I kind of echo those. I don't know. The building has been reskinned, and I think the reskinned successfully, but I still have a little bit of trouble or hesitation with just the fundamental planning decisions of the building plan in response to the site. I think mirroring it has some opportunity, some real opportunity that would be worth looking at for sure. I might suggest once you do that, do you allow more room at Folly and for that outdoor seating, and does the pedestrian path kind of respond a little bit more rather than a straight line? Does it do something different on that Folly Road side? Totally agree with the dormers. They ought to interact with the interior. If they don't, then they should be removed. In light of Joe's comments about lighting, and gas canopies are always really tough to design, maybe looking at an indirect light source rather than a direct light source, something that illuminates the canopy, which then illuminates the ground rather than the lights being mounted to the canopy and shining direct down, would be a more sensitive approach. There's something slightly at odds with one another with how the canopy and the building aesthetically interact. I can't quite put my finger on it. Maybe it's just the straight roof. I don't know. But the two, it's best represented in that rendering right there. I'm not sure I saw an elevation, and this is often the times with gas canopy structures where there's almost like a streetscape elevation that shows the canopy and the building in the same elevation. We rarely see them in the same scale on the same drawing next to each other. So it's kind of hard to tell how they relate to one another. But one suggestion might be to lower the brick on the gas canopy. The brick piers seem really heavy, but that might be a kind of a drop in the bucket to the bigger challenge with making the two more compatible.
I agree, Jeff. They're alien to each other as far as form is concerned, and not that the gas canopy isn't cool.
Right.
The idea is very nice, but I think the relationship between the two geometries is just alien to each other and is almost conflicting.
Mm-hmm. So maybe the comment is just to try to figure out a way to mesh the two aesthetics or make them more interactive.
Yeah. And not just facadal. I completely agree with what you said. Not just facadally by putting a wave on the front of the building, but actually looking at something more substantive that brings the two together.
Yep. I think the facadal components that you touched on, Dinos, just to me speaks about the plan not working with the site.
Yeah,
This is Andy. I mean, I agree, Jeff. I mean, I'm sitting here trying to find the right word. And the only word I can really come up with is confused. That I feel very confused about this. You have the building, you have the gas canopy, you have the car wash, and I really, for something that's supposed to all relate together, I don't feel like they do very well. And the site itself is, doesn't relate to itself very well, doesn't relate to the outside world very well. And the set itself, the set of drawings itself, could use some editing, and I think that goes through some of my confusion. There are things in the set that aren't in our purview, and we probably don't need to see, that are just kind of burdening down the stuff we have to look through to try to determine where we're getting to in this project. I don't know. I can't support, I guess, where we are right now, and I think there's a lot of editing and redesign that needs to go in before we can get there.
Yeah,
I mean,
I'm struggling with the deferral, considering that we're talking about mirroring the plan and really working on a lot of issues as far as the plan is concerned, and the conflicting aspects between the canopy and the building itself, and looking at simplifying. I don't know if I can get in my head that this would qualify as a deferral. It may be more beneficial to the applicant, again, that I know how difficult these probably are to work with, and but is it deferral, or is this is a denial?
I don't know. I think there's still a gulf between, normally a deferral is that you can see the bones there, and you're just kind of trying to work to that solution. I don't know. I don't really see this being a deferral personally.
Can I ask a question as an applicant?
Sorry, unfortunately, right now we're in board discussion, but if there's anything being stated that is untrue or inaccurate, then you're welcome to speak. But otherwise, it's not a time for question and answer. So I apologize.
Okay.
I would, well, I'll take a shot at it. I know that I feel confident this architect has the capacity, Chris has the capacity to really come forward with something that is more compliant. I would encourage, I think one of the problems possibly, which is why I was asking some of the questions, was that I think that a lot of this was possibly designed before we even made a site visit. And I think seeing some of the structures contextually around this piece of property are a great inspiration that would probably help lead to a more simplified and edited building. I would move that this application be denied. On a denial, do we give, well, the insight is that we would, motion to deny based on staff comments number 5, 7, and 8, and board comments, reconciliation between the geometries of the building and the fueling canopy, simplify and edit.
Sorry, Dinos, could you repeat the second board comment. So the first one, I have reconciliation between the geometries of the buildings.
Yes, between the geometries of the building.
What was the second?
The second would be to simplify and edit the design of the building to be more in keeping with the simplicity of the buildings within, particularly looking at McLeod Plantation and the structures there. I think the third is to be honest in its presentation of the building itself, with minimizing facadal treatments to the greatest extent possible.
Sorry, be honest in
treating the facades to the floor plans.
and then you say minimizing.
Yeah, minimizing or eliminating facadal treatments to the building that are not honest to the floor plan. Guys, what have I left out?
Okay, so we have a motion. Sorry, go ahead.
Dennis, would you mind adding to your motion? Is to edit the set down to just what we need to see. I mean, there's a lot of detail, a lot of sheets in here that really don't apply
Yes.
to
Yes, I think it's an excellent point, Andy.
DRB.
Comply with the submittal requirements. Look at the submittal requirements and comply with what is asked for.
Well, I agree
another
with that. It is nice to have things like your grading sheet. So maybe just,
Well, the grading sheets font, is really not what I'm talking about. There's just like erosion control.
detail sheets, right? Yeah.
Detail sheets. I mean, these things are just not really in our purview and not something we need to see. And just once again, in a set that's, we're trying to understand what you're communicating with us. Those just add, additional items. I didn't touch on it because, I kind of saw where we were going, but would like to add into the motion to edit the plant list and focus more on native plants rather than an adapted palette. I think it would really help the context of the project.
Okay, Dinos, is that okay to add?
Absolutely.
Okay, so we have a motion for denial with staff comments 5, 7, and 8, along with board comments to address the reconciliation between the geometries of the buildings. 2, simplify and edit the design of the building to be more in line with nearby contextual buildings, particularly McLeod Plantation. 3, be honest in treating facades to the floor plans by eliminating facadal treatments to the buildings that are not honest to the floor plan. 4, edit the plan set down to what DRB has purview over. And 5, focus the plant list on native plants. Is there a second?
I'll second it, this Andy.
Okay, I will now call roll. Jeff,
This is Jeff. I in favor.
Kristen,
Yes, in favor.
and then I'm also yes in favor. Thank you very much. David will be in touch with staff, the motions and comments. Next on the agenda is item number 2, William E. Murray Boulevard at Glen McConnell Parkway, requesting conceptual approval for a multifamily residential community consisting of 3-story townhomes and 3 4-story multifamily buildings plus a clubhouse.
I have just a few context slides for this. Here's the location of the site. It's at the corner of Glen McConnell and William E. Murray. The board should be familiar with the site across the street to the northwest, which was the founders apartment complex we saw recently. But here's the location. You can see the red boundary. And then looking into the site, I believe the site's already been cleared from a previous applicant. This is all I have because the applicant has a few more context slides. So with that, I'll turn it over to the applicant.
This is Katie Harrigan here from 3 North Architecture in Richmond, Virginia. We also have Paul Peoples from Seaman Whiteside, and Adam Tucker with Zimmer Development, and Andrea Almond is a landscape architect with 3 North as well. Can you move forward, David, to slide 12, I think it is, where we have the existing conditions?
Are you okay with 10 minutes or do you need time substantial beyond 10 minutes?
I can try to do 10 minutes. Does that work for you, or?
Yeah, that's great.
Okay. One or two more so we can get to the existing conditions. I apologize, they're in the middle of the deck. We were trying to match the outline. Anyway, so here's our aerial map. So we try and do kind of big picture where we are west of West Ashley along Glen McConnell Parkway. Next slide. We've kind of notated the significant features around the site, elementary schools, churches, shopping centers, and the major arterial roads. And next, please. These are the views that we're going to show next on the site from the various kind of intersections and roads. So next slide. And then here's just a kind of a Google Earth shot of the site as well, and the western portion of the site, which is cleared, as previously mentioned. Next slide. Here's another view of the site, and the next one, please. So here you can see in C, you see a street view from William E. Murray Boulevard. At the bottom right is the intersection at Glen McConnell. And then again, you can see the site on the left with a heavily treed area which would be the north of our site. And I think there might be one more slide just showing existing cleared features of the site. And then if you wouldn't mind going back kind of to the beginning where the site plan is. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So we worked significantly with staff on developing a site plan that we feel works for the site. You'll notice a significant amount of storm features on the site. The original goal was to kind of arrange the buildings on the site around the storm features and take advantage of the landscaping that could be offered there. Another main goal is to organize the buildings on the site according to scale. And so you'll notice as we come in south from Glen McConnell Parkway, William Murray, we have townhomes flanking either side of William E. Murray Boulevard, which are both 2 to 3 story townhomes. And so then the 2-story portions of those, and we'll see that in a image later, you kind of start and you grade up to the 3-story. We've situated the entrances to the southern portion of the site and the northern portion of the site directly across from each other on William E. Murray. And the clubhouse is the central feature as you enter the site. There's a 3-story multifamily building along William E. Murray, and then 2 4-story buildings tucked back into the site so that you have, again, that gradation of height as you enter to the site. And I think next we'll talk a little bit about landscaping.
Or yeah, so conceptually, we just created some, what we like to call landscape character regions on the site, but basically dividing up into just based on use and kind of the needs we have from the plants. And so you can see the key at the bottom. We delineated a buffer, which is the perimeter of each parcel. Foundation plantings and parking lots is sort of the pinkish color that's in the majority of the site. Pond and kind of riparian is the blue. And I think, as Katie mentioned, the pond at the top of the site there is a wet pond. The others are dry. So the landscape there is going to play heavily into the character of the site. And then arrival and amenity is shown in green. That's just areas where you enter the site or have select views, particularly around the clubhouse, where we want to have a slightly different planting palette for interest. Let's go to the next slide. And basically there's a plant palette for each of these areas. So I'm not going to read out all the plants, but for buffers, obviously we're looking at evergreen shrubs and really trying to get an almost 100% native palette for this site. Also low maintenance, so things that aren't going to need to be pruned, that we can really let naturalize and live in the buffer kind of happily, where we want to screen and add to the some of the existing trees around the edges. Next slide. And then it's some additional tree species that might be in the buffer. Seasonal interest is also obviously a consideration. So we are looking for some native ornamentals like service-bearing sweet beta to mix in where we have the opportunity. Next slide. And the foundation, building foundations and parking lots, just again, kind of low maintenance. We're thinking lots of native grasses and smaller evergreens that are more appropriate for parking islands and up close to buildings and sidewalks. Next slide. And then primarily using oak trees for our shade trees, but then also mixing in palms as well for some accents around the site. Next slide. And then in the pond areas, really want to come up with a nice mix of grasses and perennials to provide seasonal interest and attract pollinators, and make sure we're focusing on using native species that are going to provide some ecological benefit to the site, while also performing well in stormwater situations. Next slide. And the areas where we're trying to have a little more interest, there's just more thought on color and some perennials and some more unique plantings, things that have, scents and smells, just to provide a little more interest in those areas, but really blends and overlaps with all of the other palettes as well. Next slide. And then this is just the sort of the tree palette for those areas as well. And you can see there's a lot of overlap with the different zones to ensure that the palette of the whole site flows together. Next. Okay.
How are we doing on time? Because I think if we can fast forward to the renderings, there we go. Thank you.
I have about 3 minutes left.
Okay.
But we're a little bit flexible if you go a couple of minutes over.
Thank you so much. So we have a few renderings included in the set. In the lower right-hand corner is a key as to where the rendering is taken. So this is giving you a view of the townhomes as you enter the site. You can see on the left there is a shorter 2-story building. We've then kind of stepped the buildings up and added the gable roof forms, which are a nod to the historic Charleston kind of neighborhoods. We think pedestrian experience is really important here. And so we have, entries off of the sidewalk and porches to kind of activate the street, along with some kind of pergolas at the upper level to really try and engage the street. Next slide. This is a view of one of the 4-story buildings off the site. So you'll see we're kind of using this similar roof forms, but in a larger scale. The balconies along the side of the building are meant to be reminiscent of the Charleston side porches. Again, this is all a modern interpretation of that, but that was where we got our architectural inspiration. Next slide, please. This is a view of kind of the entry or the arrival from across William E. Murray. So you can see we have stepped down to the 2-story townhomes as you enter the site to really kind of create that pedestrian scale. Next slide, please. And then this is the 3-story building. So kind of as you turn the bend, there is kind of a multi-family garden style walk up that again, we're trying to activate the street with entry porches. And then we've split it into 2 distinct buildings that have a breezeway in between them. So we feel this way, we're really going to be able to engage the sidewalk and kind of encourage activity on the street. And then I think we have one more. This is kind of the access as you enter the site. So you're seeing the clubhouse beyond as the central feature of the entryway with the 2 flanking kind of lower height townhomes. So we feel like this scale, the organization of the building scale, really paying attention to the pedestrian experience and using architectural cues from historic Charleston are the goals and of the building and the development arrangement.
We are at 10 minutes, so if you could just wrap it up in the next minute or 2, that would be great.
That was it. I was just done.
Okay, perfect. Are there any questions from the board? I had a couple of questions, and I may have missed it, but in the packet submitted to the city that we got copies of, I didn't see a survey in there showing any existing elevations, FEMA flood zone, existing trees. I didn't know if I missed it or if it just wasn't included.
We do have that, so we might need to. We are currently going for early site package TRC as well, and so we have that information.
Okay, and is the project in Church Creek drainage basin?
I don't know the answer. Paul, do you know the answer to that one? Sorry.
I'm seeing if he's on here.
He's in the attendees, David. You'll have to let him in.
Wait a second, sorry. I'm not seeing him. He's
See him on my list, David.
There he is. I'm sorry. He was here. I think he dropped off. I don't see him now. You still see him on your list?
I do. And the reason I'm asking is that there are significantly more stringent drainage requirements, which would affect the layout of the site. And I'm not sure. And then also, just curious from a survey standpoint, one about existing trees and is the site plan working around any existing grand trees? 2 existing elevations in reference to your FEMA zone. Just knowing if you're going to be your first floor is going to be significantly higher than existing grade. Just trying to understand a little bit more big picture items on the site layout.
So the answer is it is not in Church Creek. And Paul is he has his hand raised to be
Okay.
under.
Now I see him. Okay,
Okay.
sorry about that.
Hey, can y'all hear me?
Yeah.
We can, thank you.
All right. Yeah, so to answer your questions is no, we are not in the Church Creek drainage basin. We are, it's actually right on the line of the Church Creek basin, and we have been working with Kinsey and Stormwater to ensure that we are not discharging into Church Creek. We are discharging into, it's called the Long Creek Basin, which is not, as you know, not as stringent as Church Creek. It is still a special protection area, so we are accounting for that with our stormwater design, which is why there are, if you look at it, there are a good bit of ponds on here, but it does account for the special protection area and requirements and stuff like that. Regarding the trees, this site is going to require 3 to 4 feet of fill. So we are removing most of the trees. Half the site is already cleared with an early site package plan. We are working around, we've received BZA approval for some grand tree removal, or a couple trees, but we are working around incorporating some of the trees that will be in our dry stormwater basins to save as many trees as possible.
Those are shown on the rendered site plan in this package. If we wanted to move back to that, you could point them out.
Those were all my questions. If anyone has anything else.
Yes, this is Andy. I was looking both on your renderings and on your floor plans, and it looks like all of your entrances pretty much have stairs on them. How are y'all addressing ADA in regard to this site? How are they getting to the buildings? It just looks like everything is addressed with a set of stairs.
So for the townhomes, they do have stairs, and we're treating that as a kind of single family style residence, attached, obviously. The multifamily buildings have an accessible entry at the central or the main entrance to the building, and a central corridor, in addition to exterior entrances from William E. Murray. And so conceptually, we are planning for stairs. We don't know precisely where there's going to be required at this point in time in terms of grading. But we are planning on having stairs kind of at the exterior and then a corridor on the interior. And then the 2 4-story buildings will have an accessible entrance and elevator.
So that'll get you your 60% of your entrances
Yes, it will.
accessible.
Correct.
Okay. Yeah, from a question standpoint, that's all.
Yeah, this is Dinos. Good afternoon, and thank you. I was curious, why are you drawing so heavily on the historical aspects of historic Charleston?
So that's a good question. We kind of, in kind of looking and casting about in this area, did not find too much to be inspired by architecturally. So we kind of went back to the roots of where this area is from. I know there is some kind of historic West Ashley work being done, but honestly, we are trying to kind of efficiently and effectively design these buildings to read well on the street and have good friendly fronts and really feel like a neighborhood. And we felt that was the kind of best inspiration for that. We love the porches, we like the gables. I think there's a lot of different styles of architecture to pull from in Charleston, but this is really kind of what worked well for us.
And your reference to the historical references deal with the porches, and what other aspects on your design?
I would say the side porches, the gables, the clapboard siding, those three come to mind. Kind of the entrances, and it is definitely a modern approach to that, but.
Any other questions, Enos or anyone else?
No.
No, I don't have anything.
I have just a comment, really, is that I love the shape of the pool. I like the design of a architectural,
Kristen.
historic. Yes.
We'll get to comments when we get into board discussion.
Okay.
Sorry.
Oh, okay.
Any questions though?
No, ma'am.
Okay. All right, with no more questions, we will open it up for public comments. There's no members of the public registered to speak. We did have one written submittal for this project. It is from Cynthia Bledsoe, 1281 Camerton Street in West Ashley. She mostly commented on traffic, which is not in our purview, so I'm not going to read that. Her last sentence was relevant, just stating that I am also concerned about the height of the proposed buildings. So with that, the public comment period is closed. And David, if you could please go through city staff recommendations.
Sure. Thank you, Erica. Okay. Some staff observations first off. Staff has had several meetings with the applicant on the site plan. The site plan has improved a great deal since the first meeting. Staff thinks the architectural design direction is good and interesting, especially with the townhomes. The contemporary feel and the interesting balcony detail with the posts and metal railings provide a nice aesthetic. The planter walls between the street and ground floor patios are a nice solution for privacy. Staff comment number one, staff is interested in and supports the design direction as a start. Number two, staff is pleased with the amount of green space and retention areas spread throughout the site. Number three, the plant palette is off to a good start. Number four, the clubhouse pool area with the surrounding retention is looking nice. The dry detention planted with native grasses, etc., will be a nice surrounding to the pool. Number five, there are still long expanses of parking lot and cars in the site plan. We'll consider a roundabout or a rotary with green space where there are junctions coming together in the parking lot to help break up the long stretches of parking lots. Zoning requires 263 parking spaces, and the applicant is not above that very much. They're providing currently showing 268 parking spots. Number six, another method to help break up the long expanses of parking lot is to increase the size of a few of the parking lot islands. The tree island could take up 2 parking spaces instead of 1, therefore allowing more room for green space and trees and shrubs. Number 7, staff had encouraged more sense of an arrival at the 2 entrances to the site. The first entrance, or the west entrance, is better now that the clubhouse is on the entry center, and we appreciate that the townhomes step down to 2 stories at the entry. This entry could, however, use more space by pushing the townhomes apart just a little bit more to make room for more plantings or some kind of entry feature or low walls, or maybe some entry signage as a suggestion. And that's not being asked for until preliminary review. Number 8, staff appreciates the simplicity of the architecture, but the side of the clubhouse presented at the entrance is a little underwhelming. Number 9, the east entrance entrance, which is the second entrance into the site, lacks any sense of arrival. Staff suggests moving the entrance to the west about 20 feet so it lines up with the east end of building A1 and the grand tree that's right there. Remove a few more parking spaces near the grand tree to maintain a view to the tree and the end of the building. On number 10, in the northeast corner near where the applicant shows a trash enclosure, staff had asked for a deck or a gazebo at the end of the pond for residents to enjoy along the pond system. Number 11, height scale mass needs to be studied on the long buildings. These seem overwhelming in scale, but staff likes the attempt to break up the mass with the balconies versus the siding facades. Building B1 has a break in the middle of the building with a hyphen or a break in the roof. Doing the same to buildings A1 and A2 would help break up the long structure. Number 12, label everything on the site plan, including trash enclosures. Number 13, always include north arrows on all the site plans. Staff is recommending deferral because there's still some issues with the height scale mass and a little bit to do with the site plan as well. We have a couple other comments to be addressed by preliminary though. Number 14, include the clubhouse in 3D imagery and a better view of building B1 with the break in the center of the building. Number 15, show the roof lines on one of the site plans to better understand the building layout in relationship to the site. And that's all we have for staff comments.
Thanks, David. Does the applicant team have any responses or clarifications to David's comments or the public comment?
So I think our biggest question would be regarding the parking. I think we've gone back and forth significantly with both staff and planning to reduce the amount of parking on site, thus reducing the number of multifamily units. So those are directly tied to each other. And this plan is kind of, we were under the understanding that this site plan was approved as previously submitted. So losing parking spaces at this point in time is going to significantly impact the health of the project. So I guess the question is there a way forward without losing more parking spaces?
Or with, as Paul, without, I guess, obviously doing any major alterations to the site, since we do have a BZA approval on the current, which is linked to the current site plan as well, that, as David mentioned, we have worked with DRB and TRC staff to greatly improve this site plan.
Yeah, but I just wanted to say no approvals were given, and no approvals given until we see the architecture. And this is the first time we've seen everything together.
Yeah, and any board of zoning appeals, BZA approvals are separate from DRB. I mean, both are technically required for a project.
But,
So with
but DRB did review the site plan, correct? And we went back and forth a couple different times to discuss the parking arrangement.
So that's just staff feedback. That's not the board giving any approvals. So you have to come to the board for conceptual approval and preliminary approval.
Okay, I guess, but David is staff, correct? And he's the one that made the comment regarding the parking reduction.
I'm not sure on the details of what has happened, but David will be available after the meeting and tomorrow, but we can't get into a dialogue. I apologize just from a procedural standpoint right now.
No problem.
Okay, thank you. So with that, we will move into board discussion and any motions on the project.
Well, this is Andy. I think from a site planning standpoint, I mean, it really looks to me like we have some very large buildings and groups of buildings amongst parking. There's very little, there are spaces that are very nice. I would say the clubhouse area is very nice, but there's nothing to relate that clubhouse area to the townhomes across the street or even the buildings that are really adjacent to it. I mean, I think there's a significant amount of site detailing and kind of interspaced details that could bring a better flow, better relationship between the individual buildings to very much improve the site plan. While William F. Murray is the entrance in the site, I really do feel like this site turns its back onto Glen McConnell, which is the greater public space, and you can see right into the site from Glen McConnell. I mean, I just have a really hard time with this deal. I think that there's, as David mentioned, there's no real sense of arrival. I understand that, where the clubhouse is your primary entrance. The second entrance down William F. Murray could, need some help. It really feels like you're coming right into a parking lot, that there's no, even as a secondary entrance, there's no detailing there. I will say that I find the planting palette, a very, very good start. There are some plants I would recommend editing out, but that can be done at a preliminary level. I would like to see how they're being used as much as, just the zones, but once again, that's a preliminary item. Just understanding that, there may be comments at that preliminary level. I just really think from a site planning standpoint, this has a lot of work to be done, especially on the sense of the arrival and the relationship of the project elements to each other.
Yeah, this is Dinos. We have dealt with a couple of very similar applications in the past when we're trying to translate vertically, and I can greatly appreciate the design team's challenges dealing with the site and certainly the issues associated with the integration of the parking. I think there are a couple of things that struck me, and I think the first is maybe along the lines of what Andy was saying, that we've been successful in even sites this constricting to see a greater infusion of building, parking, site, where everything seems to be working with and off each other. The site appears very rigid in the manner it's presented, and I think it's reflected back personally in the architecture of the long buildings. Though I feel those buildings really need to be broken up to an extent, and I would encourage the applicant also. There are if you study many of the West Ashley Revitalization Commission's plans, the issues associated with the Plan West Ashley and a variety of other resources that are available, there are other rather significant inspirations architecturally that could probably help out significantly. And whereas I greatly appreciate the applicant's approach to trying to provide a modern interpretation of what historic Charleston architecture might be, this just isn't getting it. It comes off so rigid in the manner that it's being conveyed. Even in the standpoint of just looking at the renderings and the way that the renderings and the elevations begin to work. I mean, there are pieces, but it's particularly on these long buildings, it's pretty much lost. I'm back to some of the comments that we've made before on some other projects. I think I understand the expression of form, particularly on the end gables. But I think this might be a situation where overhangs really do help the building. I'm intrigued with the color palette. I do believe that is very interesting and very a brave approach. There's just, to me, it loses the fluidity if we're dealing with a wetland site. It misses a lot of what's starting to happen with the clubhouse, where there's an interaction of vertical structure and landscape. I missed one point. So basically, the parking that we're showing is in strict compliance with zoning. We don't have excess parking.
Only a few places.
Only a few places. And may I ask, Erica, do I understand that TRC, the courtesy conceptual TRC application has been made?
I am not sure. The
Yes, it has.
And have you attended that first TRC meeting and gotten feedback and comments?
So we have been working with TRC staff and DRB staff on developing the site plan over the last several months, because we are currently just completed our second review at TRC for the early site package. And one of the requirements to get the TRC early site package approval is concurrence with DRB. So we've been working with staff to get a site plan that they felt staff would support, which is how we ended up at this site plan. And that was also the site plan that was submitted to BZA based on the tree removals per the building and parking configuration. So we have had 3 TRC meetings now with the developing conceptual site plans that you're looking at.
So this site plan specifically and the plans associated with it have gone to TRC 3 times, or just the early site package, or both? So
this site plan has been linked to the early site package documents. It's required as an attachment to these submittal documents. But this site plan we've submitted to TRC today for that, for the actual site documents for this. But the site plan, TRC staff has seen this site plan twice now.
Okay, so just the illustrative one that's in front of us right now.
Yeah.
Okay.
Correct.
And also, I'd like to be clear that we don't have any excess parking whatsoever on the site. We have exact number of units to parking spaces.
And that's in accordance with zoning ordinance or market rate?
Zoning.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Is that 1.5?
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay. Got it. Any other questions? Or sorry, we're still in comment period, not questions. And Kristen, I apologize for cutting you off earlier if you wanted to speak on your comments.
Oh, thank you. I was just commenting about the clubhouse and the pool and that arrangement. I do like it. And overall, I agree with all the other comments. It's, the balconies and the facades and certain elements of the design I do like, but I also have my agreements with all the comments of staff and the board as well. And that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you. Sorry for cutting you off again.
No worries.
Any other comments or motion?
Well, but before, I would feel remiss if I didn't have some chance to chat. It is interesting. I guess when I imagine driving in this parking lot, it seems challenging, and I think part of the reaction, I think, is to make it feel more intuitive and organic, like that east entry. As soon as you enter, you kind of have to turn. You either park or you have to turn left or maybe turn right to go around building, whatever that is. So something a little more organic and intuitive feels more natural. Even if it's slight curves of that longer parking aisle in between William and Murray, so that your vistas aren't 600 feet long, your vista might be 300 feet long. But I wonder if you could solve it in a more organic way that's not a total rewrite, but more of a massaging of what's here. I'd rather like what I'm seeing from an architectural direction on the buildings, and wonder if it could be even a little bit more crisp than what's presented, in that some of these gable forms be more interpreted, I guess. Oftentimes we encourage large multifamily projects to be honest with its mass. And this one is very honest with its mass. In this page 23, building A2 is almost a little intimidating in the way that it's presented, but I wonder if it's almost like hotel-like, that the space between the gables. I don't know exactly how to address that, but I like the end caps being expressed like they are. I wonder, part of it is on the next rendering called Arrival. Hard to tell in this, the way it's presented here, but you've kind of got the gable form, and then there's an outline of the gable form that goes down, turns vertical. And then on top of that, you have like a traditional fascia. And to me, the traditional fascia seems a little extra. But like I said, I think, and then the next one, building B1, if we can kind of flip to that one, building B, yeah, this one. You know, we're so close to just breaking this building up. We practically are. We've got that breezeway with the stairwell in it, and we've essentially just mirrored the mass left to right. And I kind of appreciate Dinos's perspective on making these buildings smaller. You've already got the break, and you're already building 2 exterior walls. You could have some more freedom with the massing, even if one of these wings were mirrored so that it's flat gable, instead of gable, flat gable. Might give that impression of more building, more buildings. So I think, like, from a floor plan perspective, you're already broken up, but we've chosen to make the massing so much alike that you can't tell that it's really 2 different buildings. So I guess what I'm saying is I think I appreciate the idea of it being two structures, of breaking it up, which I think will help. And maybe it's in terms of the site feeling rigid, and I'm trying to find the site plan again. If you were to have some more flexibility in the buildings moving in and out rather than just being on the same plane, you might achieve some of that organicness without manipulating the site greatly. I still think you need to manipulate the drives, but I think having more building forms more or less lined up would help give some of that relief in the site plan. And you've got the flexibility, it looks like, in these longer units by virtue of the open breezeway. So I think taking that and pushing that idea a little bit further would help in a lot of ways. But I applaud the effort of keeping the architecture honest and being, the mass is what the mass is. And I'd encourage you to kind of hold on to that, but take some of these suggestions that we've said to make it better. And again, it might be a minority here, but I think that that clubhouse entry is really intriguing. Maybe it's underwhelming because the proportions could be slightly improved, the scale and proportion. I'm looking at the other arrival perspective. Wait, sorry to make you go back and forth. Yeah. It's not traditional and it's like welcome front door, here's a lot of glass, but it's intriguing in its simplicity. And like, I don't know, I think there's something kind of to it other than the scale and the proportion of the gable presented. There's something nice about the simplicity and the purity of form.
Well, I mean, I don't think I disagree. I'm sorry, Dinos.
No, go ahead, Andy.
I'm not so, I think the building is quite intriguing in that I just think from a site point of view, there's no real welcome.
Agree.
And I think I'm sitting here thinking, of course, going back to years of presenting the DRB and thinking about some of past comments, and I think something with these very long views and there's in an earlier era, I guess we all developed catchphrases after a while. But an architect from an earlier era, his comment was always, that there's no payoff at the end of these long vistas and these long views. And I think if you look at the site plan, there's a lot of that occurring. There's kind of these dead vistas at the end of these very long parking aisles. And there's no payoff, nothing to look at the end of them. And I'm not saying that every one of them has to terminate into something, but something that gives the site some wayfinding, some way around that, and being able to make some connection, and as Jeff said, some sense of some intuitive navigation. I think that's missing in this. Is one of the things, as Jeff says, we're reacting in this plan to that it's just missing. And
yeah, I was going to respond too. I mean, when you look at this perspective here, the elements that we're looking at right now are of interest, where to me the design begins to weaken is when you get into the long elevations and begin to translate those, and utilizing the idea of the piazza as an example of those long elevations. That this is picking up a very interesting, obviously, the piazza on Ace, which would typically be on the south side, and the manner in which the very thin Charleston house would be, but then it's lost when you get to the big building. And that's why I was hoping that my comment might provide some freedom to the applicant to explore other contextual issues associated with what might even be more representative in the area. And I think that one of the strengths of this perspective right here is that it shows a really strong relationship between the horizontal and the vertical. But when I look at the site plan overall, I lose that sense of infusion between the two. And it just, I think breaking the buildings up more so would be a huge asset. And not just with the exterior stairwell. One of the things on one of the facades you show is a security gate. That needs a lot of evolution, obviously, as far as a fence and security gate, but that's something for ongoing evolution. I'm just, I don't know, I just feel like there are elements here that we've seen before that we've probably discussed in great detail that could benefit from some of those prior dialogues and discussion. But
Someone ready to make a motion? Go ahead.
No, I was just going to defer. If someone has a better feel for it, it's just hard. I'll defer to someone else to make a motion on this one because I don't want to be overcritical.
Jeff, Andy?
Can I throw out a couple of ideas? Just if you think about it, whoever makes the motion, possibly a component of the motion can be the aspect of breaking the buildings up to smaller components, utilizing the asset of what we're seeing in this perspective that's on the screen right now and incorporating it more so within the context of the sense of scale, particularly. Eliminate the long balconies and begin to break that facade vertically as opposed to a long, and I don't say this critically, but a long barrack type sense that the building begins to break in a more scalable manner. And that there's
I agree with you, Dinos.
Needs to just be integrated within the context of bringing the site more into those breaks so that it's working both inside and outside in terms of the manner that it all is working.
Are we
Well,
currently in
also-
board discussion right now? Are we in
We are,
board
Kristen.
discussion? Okay.
Yeah.
So number 11 kind of says a lot of that the long buildings to have, more hyphen and break.
Mm-hmm.
Side view.
So I'm going to take a stab at a motion and we can see if this is where we want to go. I'm going to make a motion for denial with staff comments 5 through 13. Board comments to, as Dina said, break up these buildings both horizontally and vertically to integrate the site more into the buildings to create a better scale into the site, and to hopefully give the design team some more flexibility in addressing the site.
Sorry, could you repeat that, Andy? I did not get all of that.
Oh, come on now, Erica. I don't
fast,
remember
but
these
not
things
that
as I
fast.
say them.
I'd break up buildings horizontally and vertically to create a better
To-
scale into the site, but I think I missed something in between.
Better scalability to the site and to provide hopefully the design team more flexibility in addressing this site. To study the site plan to create better relationships.
Hold on one second.
Okay.
Sorry, is to create a better scale into the site and to provide the design team with more flexibility in the site design or within the site.
Yes. Within the site design.
All right, thank you. Sorry, number 2, what was that?
To study the site plan to create better relationships between the buildings and the spaces. And to study bringing termination to some of these vistas and long views.
I need to back up. Number 2, a study the site plan to create better relationships between buildings.
Buildings and spaces on the site.
And spaces on the site.
Well, really better to create better relationships amongst the elements of the site, including the building and open spaces, I think is what I'm trying to say.
And then number 3 was study bringing terminations to the vistas and long views.
Better termination to vistas and long views
Okay,
on the
better
site.
termination. Thank you.
I think that's the comments I had. Does anyone that want to piggyback onto that?
Okay, so we have a motion for denial with staff comment 13 and board comments. 1, to break up the buildings horizontally and vertically to create a better scale into the site and to provide the design team with more flexibility in site design. 2, study the site plan to create better relationships between the buildings and open spaces. 3, study bringing better terminations to vistas and long views.
Well, Eric, that was staff comments 5 through 13.
Oh, sorry, thank you. I'll amend the motion to include staff comments 5 through 13. Thank you.
Yes.
Is there a second?
I'll second that motion.
Okay, I will call roll.
Daniel.
Jeff,
This is Jeff. Yes, in favor. Thanks.
Kristen,
Yes, in favor.
and for the record, Dino seconded the motion. And then myself, yes, in favor. Next on the agenda is 829 St. Andrews requesting conceptual approval for a 2 to 5 story mixed use residential development.
And give me just a few minutes and let some people in here.
Would you, Madam Chair, would you mind a 2-minute break?
Sure, we will recess for 2 minutes. All right, we're ready to get started back.
Yes, I'm back. Thank you.
Thank you, yes.
David, you ready?
Sorry, I'm just getting back.
No problem.
Okay.
All right, so moving on to agenda item number 3, again, 829 St. Andrews, requesting conceptual approval for a 2 to 5 story mixed use residential development.
Okay, I've got no context for this since we've seen it before. But Nathan, you can jump right in.
Yeah, David, and go ahead and go to the next slide. Good evening, Nathan Schutte with McMillan Pasden Smith. I'm also joined tonight with Michael Harper with Grambling Development, as well as the landscape and civil team from Thomas and Hutton. I'm going to try to keep my comments fairly efficient, Madam Chair. I'm going to do my best to stay to 10 minutes. We did submit with our application for this review some fairly detailed written comments in response to board as well as staff comments from our previous submittals. With that, I'm going to focus on the design refinements and the elements of the design that has evolved based on our conversation, and where you might find specific details in the review, as there's the presentation portion at the beginning as well as the technical portion of the submittal. Next slide, please. Landscape has progressed significantly since you've last seen it, and you'll find their information organized in the set on sheets L1.1 to L1.5. You'll see it in a way organized by area, with the active and retail areas along St. Andrews, this Chase Street corridor as it evolves onto Ackerman Park, the advancement of the design of the transition of the project from Ackerman Park into the site, as well as to what is planned south here and the neighborhood. I will point out as well some conversations in our past related to heights, elevations. There's a 3-foot elevation change from Ackerman Park down to St. Andrews, and the renderings as well as the civil and landscape information reflect the coordination of that change and how we're addressing the slopes and grading to get into all of the building entrances as we navigate that across the site. Next slide, please. The overall program has not changed. We're still active retail uses along St. Andrews Boulevard. We do transition to ground level retail as we enter the site along Chase Street, or enter the site along Chase Street, and I said ground level retail, or ground level residences. In the light blue as we transition in along Chase Street, our residential leasing office, as well as really the front door for the residences there, kind of mid-block at Chase Street. We'll see some detailed views of that and the remaining residential around the site. We've included a couple of additional dimensions on here. You'll see sections in a minute to talk about the relationships of the building down to the ground plane and out to the edges of the project. But there's a few key details on, or key dimensions on the sheet that might be useful. As you move up the building, the program has not changed. David, go ahead and go to the next slide. It's all residential on levels 2 through 5 through the remainder of the project. Actually, go ahead and go 2 slides, David. The landscape team has worked closely with the architecture team to really extend the space of the project from the inside out, the vertical plane of the buildings down to the ground and out. Included in this package are these section renderings as well as the large renderings of the site plans themselves. Across the frontage along St. Andrews, we do have a landscape verge, and that building, as we've looked at before, does vary in its setback there from anywhere from 11 feet to 14 feet. We're really excited about that space. The space is created in the center of the project, and you'll see that in perspective in a minute. Next slide, please. Many of the design refinements are subtle. There was some fairly specific feedback in the last conversation, and then there was some other kind of, why don't you take a minute and study? We focus primarily on the hierarchy of the building elements here on St. Andrews. Particular emphasis and not distracting ourselves from the emphasis on the active engagement along the street, those building elements, those building forms. You'll see in the detailed package comparative elevations there. We've got them included as overalls. We also have some larger detailed elevations starting on around sheet A through 10 that give you a better sense of the specific materials and details associated with the transition of those materials in those elevations. Go to the next slide. Kind of a big idea here was back to the hierarchy of elements and the competition between the foreground of the buildings along St. Andrews and the background of the larger forms. Go ahead and go to the next slide. We have diminished the presence of the top of the building and simplified the upper form greatly. We did not actually eliminate any materials. Rather, as I mentioned, we eliminated sort of the quantity of transitions and use of those materials to create a more uniform and consistent legibility to the project itself. The top of the building, which you see here, actually participates in various treatments to the top of the building, all maintaining the same profile as it touches the sky in a diminished way. And that was very purposeful, and I think has been very successful in its application throughout the project. But then go to the next slide. Where possible, elements have been refined to lighten as they move up the building. So now we don't see anything dark or ominous over the top, whether that's a shade structure or even just, again, the way the materials touch the sky in a background nature. Go ahead and go to the next slide. And so, albeit in many ways subtle, there's been quite a number of design changes, ranging from, again, material transitions to advancement of bay windows and rooftop elements and structures, all manifest towards a place that will layer and provide focus and emphasis on the people space that we want to embrace. Next slide, please. Again, we transition to the residences on the ground. Here, closest to St. Andrews, we're the most concerned about the active nature of St. Andrews and those residents who live here. And we've layered that. Landscape team has done a wonderful job of providing a variety as well as an sort of an animated landscape design that layers and provides some separation from the public realm into the private realm of those residences. Go ahead and go to the next slide. That is a little more active in its visual appearance. You can see that from the previous submittal on the left to the submittal on the right. The space is roughly the same, but I think the layering, the sense of space, and the playfulness within the landscape design has matured very nicely. Next slide. This particular comparison shows, again, a number of the subtle changes that we made and how they manifest themselves, along with a couple of more significant design moves. We no longer have brick that extends above the fourth floor or fourth level anywhere on the project. And parapet detailing, that sort of diminutive nature of it as it transitions to the sky and touches the sky, is carried around. So it's not in competition with anything anymore. And it allows the recesses and the massing of the building to read plainly. It provides a sort of a uniform legibility and preserves the focus on the elements that we want to really pay attention and celebrate in design. I'd like to go to the next slide. Again, I'm going to do this fairly quickly. You can see how some of those, again, refinements translate down to the rest of the building. We're preserving and more consistently applying use of brick. We've eliminated some of the dark materials off the top of the building, and really enhance what's happening down and around the street level. Go to the next slide. I think this large image probably gives you the most detail into how the top of the building is being detailed, the layering and the facades, and the sense of space that it creates within itself. Very much like the introduction, and we've preserved the introduction of the larger sort of entry move here for the residences, a la what's happening on St. Andrews, and it's working quite well. We've continued to explore the membrane we're proposing for this sort of stretched fabric. It's really a fantastic piece product. It's by Sergei Ferrari. We'll have a lot more detail of that in a preliminary submittal, but we're excited about its ability to transmit light, present itself as a canvas, and very in function, it's very similar to a stretch canvas, and really had a playful context, and the exploration into the actual content of this imagery should be a lot of fun over the next phases of the design. Next slide. The project moves down to the park, and here it's a little more consistent. This is a quieter element of probably one of the quietest edges of the project. It comes down and turns the corner into the park itself. There is some on-street parking in the overall design here, help keep the project relatively human in its engagement. Go to the next slide. You'll see the advancement of the landscape evident in the renderings as the building turns the corner, starts to move down into the park, and the transition from the park into the project. Next slide. This is an overall plan of these edges and the layering of these edges, the courtyard and the privacy we'd like to maintain in the courtyard, while balancing that with sort of the visual access both into the courtyard from the park, but also from the courtyard back out to the park, the landscape in and around these areas. Next slide. This is a little more detailed view of just how much energy is really in this landscape as it transitions and moves from the scale of the building down into the park itself. Next slide. I would point out probably the way the balconies, we've actually refined fairly significantly some of the proportions of the porches on this side of the building, the way they come to the top and the way those roofs interplay with the finish of the top of the building, again, in a fairly consistent way, but one that I think continues to reinforce the expression of those porches as a place for people and a place for the residents to embrace the park itself. Next slide. There was some specific discussion about this portion of the building at the very end of the last presentation, and we took some time to go back and try to understand what that comment was all about. And we made we applied some of our original thinking to the overall shape and legibility of these elements. We wanted to keep them calm, consistent. We don't want them to be overpowering, but simple. And we did incorporate more brick in this solution, but I think one of our keys here is just how simple, I suppose is the best word, how simple these forms can be and need to be as they turn the corners and really become a passive part of the project here to the project's south. So in its consistent treatment, its detailed use of materials, and really just trying to complete the project in a cohesive way without, while maintaining the quality of what the project's doing on all of its sides. So I did that very quickly. If you want to go to the last slide, David. I did that very quickly. There's a lot of detailed information in the set. We're happy to answer questions, talk more specifically about design decisions and maybe some of the subtle things that are evident in the renderings or may not be. And look forward to the discussion and working with this board to come back for preliminary approval. With that, thank you.
Thank you, Nathan. All right, so that was not quite 14 minutes. So we'll have that same amount of time roughly for public comments. I'll start on, sorry, now it is time for board questions and then we will get into public comments. Are there any questions from the board?
This is Dinos. Just had, and Nathan, thank you so much. And thank you for the ongoing evolution. I had one question for you, and I noticed as I went through the civil drawings on, David, can you go to C1.3?
Oops, sorry.
That's all right. I didn't think that looked like Nathan's project. It was on the civil drawings.
Oh,
The
I'm
civil
sorry.
drawings
Yeah,
that,
it's back in this way.
And I can ask there we go. There we go. Can you blow up into the, I'm drawing on my screen. Keep going, blow it up some more, and move it toward the center. That works. I was curious about yeah, that's perfect. On the Mix One property, which I understand is owned by the same developer, you're abandoning a property line at the base of that. I was just curious why.
I'm gonna have to phone a friend on that one, actually. Tony, do you have a moment you can? I'm not sure I know.
It was just when I saw it, I was just curious. I didn't know if it was for anything specifically dealing with this project, but it did seem it just caught my eye.
I can
No. Oh, okay.
I can answer the question. It's Michael Harper. You know, all of these properties were separate parcels that we have assembled over time, and I did get a text from Tony that would like to be in the meeting, but hadn't been admitted. But all of these were separate parcels that we assembled over time, and they're all zoned general commercial. They're all zoned at 26.4 units of residential density per acre. And so that is another parcel that we own that potentially could be, that property line could be abandoned, and it could be folded into the overall assemblage, which would add some density to the apartment site. But it's not necessary. That has not been done yet. And quite frankly, I don't know for a fact that we will do that. And I don't know that we need to do that. So that is probably just an old site plan that we had at a time when we were talking about doing it, but it's not necessary to the program.
Okay, thank you. I was, again, just a curiosity aspect.
If I could interrupt for a second, this is David Meeks. If you could ask Tony what he used to log in with, because his name's not on the list.
Okay.
If he called in on a phone number and didn't supply me with the phone number, then I have no way of knowing how to let him in.
Okay. I will do that. He should be a pro at this.
While we're waiting on Tony, I had a couple of questions. I know that there were some unresolved items on Fire Lane. Has that been resolved, and where does that stand? And same thing for any refuse collection. I know that was a topic of discussion as well at some of our previous meetings.
So I'll address that. I got that one. So working backwards, you actually square in the middle of the screen right now, you actually see the service areas underneath the ramp, relatively near the entrance to the garage. We've got it tucked around the corner under the ramp of the garage. So services, trash, etc., will all occupy that space. You may see also in another one of the project plans, the service corridor at the back of the retail. That information is in there now, as well as even some information on, because there was even some technical questions about exhaust hoods and that routing. So that's in the set on in the technical portion of the architecture. Related to the proposed fire access road, we continue to work very closely with the city and their staff on coordinating that. That is, you can see it noted here along the edge of the drawing. We are moving forward with that and choreographing the details of confirming that that happens the way that we intend for it to happen. So at this point, it's a function of design and process with the city to finalize that as we move forward through TRC.
Got it. Thank you.
Nathan, you had mentioned also a tabletop crosswalk.
So yes, if you slide back to that would, it's probably most visible in the slide 14 of the presentation, David. So there's a tabletop quad. So you see the main entrance right there that'll take you up to the rooftop. So there's a small tabletop connecting from the island across. We do expect some of the people who visit this retail and this project to park in the parking lot, and try to be very deliberate about giving them a safe and well-designed way to get across that drive aisle. I just tried drawing on my screen too, Dino, so you're not the only one.
We need to put our pins down because I've got pin marks all over my screen, Nathan. So that was, I see. So it was basically the landscaped portion kind of defines an access across the tabletop walkway.
Correct. Yes.
Is that what I'm reading? Okay. And I was just, it was more of a curiosity question as far as the abandonment of that property line. If it has nothing to do with the evolution of this design, I mean, we don't have to wait for an answer, Madam Chair, as far as I'm concerned. I was just more curious.
Oh, Tony Woody is available.
I had one more question. Go ahead.
Hey, I'm sorry, Madam Chair. This is Tony Woody. Yes, I think you all got it right in our absence that it was early on in the site. We discussed abandoning the property line, bringing the MEX one into the city, and ultimately just because the MEX one is in Charleston County and unincorporated Charleston County and not the city of Charleston, we cannot abandon that property line, so it will not be abandoned.
Okay, thank you, Tony.
Yes, sir.
I had one more question. How were the sidewalk and pathway widths determined? They seem to vary throughout the site plan, between 4 and 6 feet, it seems mostly. Could you talk through the thought process there?
So maybe David, go to slide 3. And granted, this is a more graphical representation, Erica, and not the technical one. So I think the intent of the design was to create as active and a fluid people space as possible along St. Andrews. So where we expected more people, you'll see broader sidewalks and more hardscape. We use more of a planter scenario and other kinds of site furnishings along that area. The initial portion of Chase Street, I do believe, is a slightly wider sidewalk until we get to the building's, I'll say, residential front door there, adjacent to the garage entry drive. I think from there, most of our walks are a little bit narrower because frankly, we don't expect as much people traffic, particularly the public, to use them. And John might have more detailed response to that, but I generally believe that's the way it's organized.
Madam Chair, are you talking about the difference in the width of the sidewalks that come from the units as opposed to the width of the sidewalk that's parallel in Chase Street?
Correct. And I think just trying to understand too, you know, there's been a lot of emphasis from the board and from a lot of the public comments that we're getting on connectivity from bike and pedestrian standpoint, and tying into, you know, the Plan West Ashley recommendations. And so I was just curious on what the thought process was, because some of the sidewalks which connect to the park do seem a little bit narrow from what the city normally likes to see. So I was just curious if there was, what the thought process was there. If there.
Well, the sidewalk on Chase Street is a 5-foot sidewalk, which we thought was standard, but I mean, we can certainly look at widening that if that is
Sure.
a recommendation.
Okay, I see. I was looking at the wrong place in the plan to see the 4 foot versus the 5 foot and where that transition happens.
The 4-foot sidewalks, I believe, are coming from the individual units.
Correct. Yeah, I see that.
Yeah, and that's just for the whoever lives in that unit. So I would have to defer to John and Nathan, but part of the aesthetics, I believe they wanted it to be narrower.
Yeah, we were trying to create kind of balance between the private realm of those little patios and the public nature of the sidewalk. So we just didn't expect, yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions from the board?
Well, to kind of couple on that, if we go to the technical documents and look at L1.1 and some of the other L sheets, you can start to see the sidewalks and diagram. Yeah, and I think the last time we had talked about this application, we had a lot of question about what happens along St. Andrews and specific to the relationship between the building face and the curb. And we'd asked for this blow up with some dimensions. We got the blow up, but I don't see any dimensions. So I'm gonna have to ask, and let's walk through some of these dimensions. On the northeast corner between the building and the curb is approximately how many feet?
So on the right-hand side, that is 10 feet 9 inches.
Between the building and the curb?
Correct.
Okay.
So I think the dimensions you might be looking for are actually on sheet, minute, and I could be wrong, but let's try this. Page 4 of the presentation.
Okay.
Sorry, I was trying to get them in a place, Jeff, where it would be, so 11 feet 10, it was wider than I thought. So where I think you were asking is down there in the bottom right-hand corner. So it's 11 feet 10, it's slightly behind the adjacent bridal shop.
Got it. Okay, 11 feet 10 on the bottom, and then at the corner it's 11 foot 6. Is that what I'm seeing?
It is, and that's a little bit deceiving because that's the tightest point on the radius, and the radius is set into the building. So if you went out perpendicular from the face of the building to the curb, it's closer to 14 feet.
Got it. Okay. And on that 11 foot 10 zone down the bottom right here, that the verge is about how wide?
It is 4 feet. Yep, and that's, yep, it's 4 feet.
Got it. And okay.
And that is consistent.
Okay, got it. Just along St. Andrews, and there's no verge and along Chase, which is whatever. Got it.
Correct.
All right. So that would make that sidewalk on that, and on this plan, on the lower right plan, that would make the sidewalk how wide?
From the face of the building, not quite 8 feet. So it'd be 7 feet 10.
Okay, right, because you got 11, 10 minus 4 feet.
Right.
And then it looks like there's some planted areas. If I go back to L11, there's some planted areas. So the continuous sidewalk looks to be a little bit less than that. The continuous sidewalk looks to be 3 to 4 feet less than that. So it might be like a 4 or 5 foot walk is what I'm seeing. And that would be, like I said, L11. Draw on page 35.
You want me to go there, Jeff?
Well, I think it'd be helpful, yeah.
Which page? I'm sorry.
Page 35, sheet L11. It's in the technical document. Key bongo. Oh, yep, there you go. So if you kind of zoom into that top right corner, we've established that from the building face to the edge of the curb is 11 foot 10. There's a 4 foot verge that makes to the edge of the sidewalk to the corner, 7 foot 10. And if you zoom in a little bit more, you'll see some more planting areas there. I'm just trying to understand what I'm seeing. That's all, Nathan.
That's fine.
This is
It's about 5 feet, Jeff, outside of the planting areas
Got
at
it.
the tightest point.
Got it. About a 5-foot walk connecting. Okay, great. All right. And then as I see 3 oak, that looks like live oak trees according to the legend. And then it brought the sidewalk broadens to a paver area and then goes into this cool little courtyard zone and then continues on to the corner of St. Andrews and Chase. But at this particular spot, the sidewalk chokes down. Could you maybe speak to why it chokes down right there? And maybe another question might be how it relates to the paving in place at the neighboring site.
So the neighboring site, the sidewalk goes straight to the face of the building. We are playing a little bit of a game. So the actual dimension, I got to phone a friend here. It's 5'6" of actual sidewalk at its narrowest point there on that corner. What you're seeing, those planted areas in the face of the building participate in these sort of shadow box profiles that we have developed in the architecture there of the facade. And if we look at,
right, it's got the little fin thing.
It's got the little fins, and they're roughly the depth of the door swings, so that we've created a transition from the sidewalk into the retail and into the outside of the facade. Whereas on the other mass, we're doing that with the thickness of the facade. So you move through that space in the facade.
Right. Let me,
so that's what's going on there. And I think we did it that way. Well, frankly, I did it that way so that the mass of the building didn't come any further forward.
Right. Well, that's a good question about what should the right relationship between the curb and the building be. That's kind of what I'm trying to study here. And the continuity of the sidewalk is another little important but sidebar. Going back to how this interacts with its context, and this is a finer detail, I think how it relates to I think that's Bridals by Jody, isn't it? The adjacent property.
It is, yep.
Okay, like understanding how that sidewalk exists in place and how we're going to adjoin it is an important detail, and maybe we're just not quite there yet with this.
So go to the slide. I guess it would be the slide that said "Thank you, David." Slide 23.
And you
because
might say,
we've rendered it.
You might say, why does this matter? It's a concept design, and to some degree you're right, but and it's the smaller things when we are integrating into a established context that is the bigger things. So at some point, this little thing becomes a big thing. So does the Bridal by Jody does it have a verge too? I'm sorry if I
Does, yep. I'm looking at Google Earth now and it does.
Okay, gotcha. Right.
I don't know about width or dimensions, but there's curb, verge, and sidewalk.
Got it. Thanks.
I believe our verge is slightly wider so that we can get street trees in it.
Have y'all, I know we've talked a lot about this project. In terms of street trees, are there any underground utilities that would prevent trees from being there?
Not that we're aware of.
Right.
We may find something, but so far so good.
Right. And if without trees, would that drastically change the design or the approach?
I like that. That's an interesting question. I'm not sure I've put a lot of time into the reverse answer of what we've done. We very much like the introduction of a street tree here for the layering of the scale of, and frankly, the quality of space that we get along St. Andrews by doing it.
Agree. Okay, thank you. I appreciate you walking through that with me.
And not a problem.
Any other questions from the board? With none, we will move on to the public comment period. I'm going to start by reading the letters that were received from the public. That way, when the members that are registered to speak, if what they were planning to say has already been said, if you could just echo those remarks, that would be great. So the first letter is from Donna Jacobs. Good evening to the board. I spoke in January and March when this project was previously shown. At both of those meetings, I pointed out that the redevelopment of the Ryan site has immense potential to showcase what revitalization can mean for West Ashley. Plain West Ashley spoke to the importance of mixed use when commercial sites and major intersections were considered for redevelopment. It is imperative that this project reflects the highest and best for the area. With that, I'm happy to see a continued improvement to the design for the site. I do believe the architectural conversation between St. Andrews Boulevard, Ackerman Park, Chase Street, and the neighborhood has become more unique and respectful. I know that the board, with all its expertise, will continue to refine the necessary details in this matter as the project moves forward through the process. I also see that the architectural design along St. Andrews Boulevard is much more exciting and increases the opportunity for a very active engagement with the pedestrian. I just want to make sure that the illustrated larger sidewalk is reflected in those specific details of the design. Connectivity is critical along this area to the neighborhood, to the next phase in the site, and to West Ashley Bikeway. A pedestrian-friendly design in front of the site is paramount. In addition, the rooftop spaces shown should be designed in such a way to minimize any noise and lighting issues to the neighborhood of Avondale, as well as the new residents of the project. Since you are the experts at reading the technical documents, I would like to point out several practical considerations of the design in hopes that you assure they are addressed, because the devil's in the details, even at the conceptual level. Lighting within the parking structure and along the project should provide safety for the residents and users and in no way intrude on the park or the Avondale residents. On page 16 of the presentation, building B entrance from Chase Street is illustrated and doesn't appear to be adequate for service trucks, garbage recycling, commercial goods delivery. Diagram A101 illustrates some service access, but not completely. Details appear to be incomplete on this diagram. The creative minds of architects can add details to not only the building, but to the support infrastructure of fire emergency vehicles, moving trucks, loading areas, trash recycling disposal areas, etc. The conversation of form and function is always critical. I've asked these questions before in prior meetings and hope the applicant will address these formally for the board. Service can be attractively hidden and yet still fully functional. Chase Street and St. Andrews should not become the default for these service activities. All of these and maybe a few other infrastructure considerations should be carefully reviewed in order that properties along Avondale Avenue not be needed for these purposes. Next is from Charlie Smith. Dear board, the recent modifications to the DRB proposal have been improved overall project significantly, but there are still significant concerns regarding connectivity and how the proposed buildings will otherwise relate to the street, sidewalks, and neighborhoods. We should also be concerned about how the first phase will ultimately relate to the second phase of development, that these will affect Sycamore Avenue and St. Andrews intersection and residents of Maryville. To be sure the people who come with it can safely move about on our streets and sidewalks, that connectivity with our existing neighborhoods is optimized. He is asking that the application be deferred until these connectivity issues are sufficiently addressed. Once the project receives conceptual approval from DRB, the ship will have sailed in terms of our ability to modify the project. And waiting to the project reaching TRC to ensure that there is appropriate connectivity is too late for the public to raise any red flags. Once we have allowed the project to be pushed right up to the current placement of existing sidewalks and allowed for vehicular parking between bike lanes and sidewalks, there's no way to ever keep cyclists safe from car doors and careless drivers or to adapt to expected growth. Next is from Diane Hamilton. She talks about traffic, which is not in our purview. And so then she states that she's lived in this community her entire life. In addition, she's the immediate past president of the Maryville Ashleyville Neighborhood Association. The quality of life as well as the safety of citizens are important to her. Next is from Cynthia Bledsoe, 1281 Camerton Street. She's glad there is a redevelopment plan for the property, but she's opposed to an open-ended 2 to 5 story use. 2 or 3 story buildings are acceptable at 5 stories is much higher than the current streetscape and out of scale for the street, and nearby storage building is 4 stories and dominates the street. An additional close by building of this size would dramatically alter this road and make suburban West Ashley feel all too urban. We have another submittal from Mr. Mark Bell at 45 Sycamore Avenue. He is asking the project to be rejected on items that are not in our purview, which are density and use. Another email from Mr. John Champagne, 14 Toby Road. Design and height should have input from surrounding neighborhoods. In my opinion, max height should be limited to 3 stories. Concerns over materials allowed and increased traffic and height need to be addressed with the residents of surrounding neighborhoods. An email from Ashton Finley, supporting of density of the site. The hulking mass fronting St. Andrews is out of scale with lower roof lines and the beauty of grand trees in West Ashley. A height of no more than 2 to 3 stories is more appropriate. The storage center across the street referencing that as a universally panned as one of the biggest mistakes in West Ashley. Just concerned about materials, specifically the gray brick looks nice, but the lighter white horizontal siding looks cheap. Metal railings and balconies and flat windows also look very cheap. And the site deserves the highest quality design and materials. A correspondence from Heather Hall, 14 Toby Road. She would like to comment that she feels the new development should be a max of 3 stories. Also referencing the storage building across the street that is an eyesore. She opposes anything over 3 stories.
Oh, God, big cat.
A submittal from Bridget Lussier. She has requested to speak, so I will add her if she's on here to the speaking list. If she's not on, I can read her letter, but she did say otherwise. An email from Jenny Ulbrich that she is not opposed to the development of the multi-use spaces. However, she objects to the minimal setback of the buildings from St. Andrews. It appears from the rendering that there is space for a few trees and a sidewalk. The type of build up to the sidewalk approach to new construction presently plaguing the Charleston area creates what is known as the urban canyon effect, which results in negative impact on local wind, air, and noise quality. She suggests the developer amend the plan, giving consideration to how positively engage with those who walk, bike, or drive the road to create a more visually appealing, healthier, and attractive space. She also submitted a picture with it, which David, I don't know if you're able to, but it's just an image of a pedestrian bike kind of courtyard with outdoor seating, bikes, benches. Next is from Evelyn Putnam, who cited reasons for traffic, which is not in our purview, and one submittal from Whitney Raniero, who is not in favor of anything over 2 stories being built. And then last written is from Sharon Wood, opposed based solely on use, so that is not in our purview. So with that, we will move on to members registered to speak. We will get started with Eric Pullman.
Good evening, board members. Sorry about that. I had not hit the mute button correctly. So yes, I'm Eric Pullman. I'm the West Ashley project coordinator with the city of Charleston. And I just want to speak in support of this project and of the long efforts that the city planning department, design review board, technical review committee has been doing, working with the developer to make sure that this project is moving forward. This is a very important redevelopment site for the city. We have been working very closely with Bramlin Brothers and with McMillan Paston and Thompson Putnam to make sure that this is going to be a top flight, top tier redevelopment for West Ashley. We're very pleased with the direction that you guys have, all you board members have given for the project. Feel that it has definitely lended some additional value to this property. You know, we're very excited to see this project continue along. We feel that the height, scale, and mass is very appropriate according to Plan West Ashley, along with the street front activation and the additional activation that will occur at Ackerman Park. So, just wanted to say thank you guys for all of your time, and that this is going well.
Thank you, Eric. Councilmember Shade. Is he on, David?
Oh, I'm sorry. I guess I did not allow him to talk, so now he can. Councilman Shade?
I'm here, but my video is not working.
It's okay.
All right. So anyhow, again, thank you, board members, for your very meticulous review of this project. I think I lost count of the number of times we've been before you on this. To echo a little bit about what you've heard from the public comment points and from what Mr. Pullman just mentioned, this is a particular concern to the city because we want to see this area revitalized. It is a sore eyesore as it exists right now. We do have our West Ashley Farmers Market behind this building and additional plans for the redevelopment of the dog park and the farmers market and the connectivity issues that y'all have heard raised by other folks as well. In addition, the county is working on redesigning the intersection of Sycamore and St. Andrews. I say that with the backdrop because this is the premier project that is going to be tested as to how this fits into Plan West Ashley. And there are several people who have got major concerns regarding this. I appreciate how the applicant has made several adjustments to the comments that y'all have raised on it. But I would also just remind you to pay attention to those comments as you decide whether or not this passed the muster that y'all have been asking about them. The connectivity from the back of the building to Sycamore Street is still of a concern to us, but I know that we can iron out some of those issues as well as this thing goes through the other review process. Thanks for listening to me, and I appreciate all the comments that my fellow citizens and neighborhood association presidents have weighed in on this. Thank you.
Thank you, council member. Next is Katie Zimmerman.
Hi, all. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Katie Zimmerman, and I'm speaking as both the executive director of Charleston Moves and also as a neighbor living behind this property. As you all have heard me mention before, it's important to ensure that the frontage along St. Andrews Boulevard includes a wide multi-use path. The reason why I bring this up at DRB is because you all have direct purview over the building's location and massing, which will affect how much room is available for a multi-use path. And also you all require walkways to be identified for your review. A 10-foot multi-use path is recommended in Plan West Ashley for the St. Andrews Boulevard corridor along this side of the street, and for good reason. Otherwise, shepherding people on bikes into the existing on-street bike lane between the parked cars that are shown in the drawings and motorists moving at least 45 miles per hour is a recipe for disaster. As someone who has been biking this corridor twice a day for 14 years, the current situation is already tenuous. There will only be more people biking here as they are attracted to this redevelopment project, as well as heading to the new bike ped bridge over the Ashley. A multi-use path along this parcel would connect directly to the multi-use path project underway by Charleston County that will go from Sycamore Avenue to the Maryville Bikeway entrance. For this development in particular at 829 St. Andrews, 10 feet wide may not be enough given the applicant's desire for outdoor dining within the space. So I ask that the DRB consider a request to shift the buildings back enough to provide at least what is detailed in the recommended cross-section for St. Andrews Boulevard in Plan West Ashley. That's space for at least a 10-foot path beyond the width needed for outdoor dining, at least 3 feet of buffer space, and whatever extra space is needed for addressing curb, gutter, and other issues. Again, all that is per the proposed cross-section that's outlined in the St. Andrews Boulevard plan in Plan West Ashley. Thank you.
Thank you, Katie. We are starting to run out of time for public comment. So if we could keep the next few brief. Mr. James Ward.
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me?
We can, thank you.
Yes, I'm speaking as a resident in the neighborhood, as a landscape architect, and also as a professor in planning at the college. Generally, I'm in favor of this denser development. Appreciate the use of the parking garage to avoid surface parking. I think that's a real plus. We need to recognize, just as Katie was saying, we're setting an important precedent for St. Andrews here for both bike and pedestrian. And since we are giving up a slice of the park, we should be getting some consideration here. The verge, rather than a more typical urban street tree detail along St. Andrews, seems to be out of keeping, although with the urban nature of the architecture. A greater urban articulation of the sidewalk and bikeway seems appropriate in keeping with what we're trying to do. I think it requires more space, some setback with urban detailing, perhaps even a bus access. just as Katie has indicated. The architecture is simple, but on St. Andrews, it seems a bit massive to me and out of sync with the more vernacular architecture of the area, a bit like Halsey Museum downtown. More pedestrian scale details on St. Andrews seems to me appropriate. The further development of Chase Street to include moving the trees to the sidewalk since they are too close to the building in the area close to the park, not in the forward area, with a typical street tree approach is another urban element we can bring. Also, the 5-story mass of the building seems to dominate the park from the elevations I see there. We should be looking at least getting a more naturalized planting along that edge, much like the areas behind Concord. It just needs more screening. I understand that it's playful and imaginative, but the massing of it, as well as perhaps the incorporation of some drainage features like Concord does, would be appropriate. The cow on the screen is an interesting idea, but the history of the site is more vegetable production and perhaps more specifically strawberry fields, which could be an interesting motif. You should consult with Diane Hamilton about that. I think as Mr. Shahid has indicated, that we need to make sure that we keep the neighborhood aware of all the improvements on Sycamore, because that's going to be an important way for people to see how this can start to build the neighborhood and provide connectivity. Thank you very much. I look forward to seeing this project brought forward.
Thank you.
Erica,
Yes.
I just wanted to point out that I don't see Kenneth Marolda on the list.
Okay. And how about Bridget Lussier?
I didn't have her signed up to speak.
She was the one who her email or her submittal said that she wanted to speak.
Oh, yes. Let me see here. No, I don't see her on the list either.
Okay. I will just then quickly summarize what she submitted. Bridget Lussier from 42 Anita Drive. She concerns as president of Magnolia, which is adjacent or numerous, traffic, which is not in our purview. Number 2 is lack of green space. 3, increased green space is needed, and that you should not be relying on the adjacent park. 4, the design presented relied on vault storage for stormwater, and she had comments there regarding a loss of a wetland swale along St. Andrews Boulevard. And that is it. So with that, we will close the public comment period and move into city staff recommendations. David, please.
Okay, thank you, Erica. Staff is supportive of the proposed height scale mass for this project, as well as the design direction. Additionally, the landscape plan and plant palette are developing nicely. Staff comment 1, there's more consistency in this submittal with the cornice around the top of the building than in the prior submittals. However, the previous submittal showed more of a pronounced cornice or a darkening of the cornice in the current proposed profile. So we were preferring the more pronounced cornice. Number 2, section A of the front courtyard is shown a couple times. Actually, this comment has been addressed. It's just asking for them to show the entire courtyard, which they've done now. So we could actually scratch number 2. Number 3, by preliminary submittal, please provide color renderings so we can better understand the exact locations of the brick on the exterior facades. Number 4, plan or coordinate for a bicycle path or connections to the surrounding area along Chase Street and St. Andrews Boulevard. Per West Ashley plan, staff suggests continuing the pavers shown at the Chase Street crosswalk around to the front of the building into the property line by the bridal shop. The continued paving pattern could begin to indicate connection. But with that, we do recommend conceptual approval.
Thank you, David. Nathan, do you and your team have anything you would like to respond or clarify from the city staff comments or public comments?
I think I would simply like to say it's been an interesting dialogue, and one that I think this board has taken to heart as we've advanced and developed this project. I like the design response we have. We've worked tirelessly to get the massing and the way we address these edges right. We feel good about that and look forward to continuing to working with the board on that. We hear some of these connectivity comments. I think those are things we can continue to refine and address as we move this project forward. And in the end, we're excited about the energy that this project has potential to bring to this part of West Ashley and really enhance through the presence of people, this entire area. And so we look forward to that, look forward to the board's comments and coming back and having this conversation at preliminary review.
Thank you. With that, we are now in board discussion and or a motion.
Well, this is Dinos. First of all, with all of the work that Councilman Shade has invested in the thousands of, I can only imagine, thousands of hours that he has put into West Ashley revitalization, Plan West Ashley, et cetera, his engagement has been just absolutely tremendous and embraced by, I know, all of the board members. James and Katie both brought up excellent points, which is where I think, and Jeff, you tell me if I'm wrong here, but it sounded like where you were going with a lot of your dialogue with regards to the setback of the building, or at least the amount of the path width. And I believe that in one of the former meetings that we had, Andy had made a comment regarding the width of landscape and sidewalks on Daniel Island and how successful that is in terms of the opportunity for creating those pedestrian interactions. And one of the things that, I mean, it's amazing sitting here learning more and more of the comment that Mr. Ward made regarding on Chase Street, flipping the landscape area to the street side and bringing the sidewalk possibly to the building really makes a lot of sense. I think the issue that the architecture, I think, has evolved very nicely. I appreciate what McMillan, Pasman Smith and Nathan's team has done in truly simplifying. I do want to make one clarification, and possibly David or Erica, you can ensure that there's clarity here. As a board, we are responsible to respond to designs that fall within the context of zoning. We truly don't have the authority to modify or adjust zoning, correct?
What specifically, when you say
Height, number of stories, things such as that.
I mean, that's my understanding, but
yeah,
my understanding as well.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that for any of the public that may have been listening to all of this. I do believe that again, from an architectural standpoint, the evolution has been really successful. I do feel that the building, if we talk about a sense of place, and we've discussed the importance of this design, acknowledging that it is not downtown, but actually within the context of a suburban area. And I think now that we have dimensions on the site plan, it has been a great asset in helping us understand what those distances are from street edge to the building itself. And I do believe too that as we move down Chase Street, it becomes too constrictive, and needs to have more opportunity to breathe as it goes down. I mean, that really is the main extent of my comments. Is if you look at the building sections that are presented, you see trees that are represented that are growing into the building, which is a true indication to me that, you know, additional space is warranted as you walk down the sidewalk. That's pretty much my thoughts.
generally my same perspective about St. Andrews is just the proximity of the building to the curb, and a lot of that is that the public sidewalk space. My fear is that we kind of create something like the buildings on Hughie Street and Meeting Street, a little multi-family thing where the building is right on the sidewalk, right on the curb. And we're kind of in that borderline between suburban and urban, and wondering if the proximity to the building to the curb isn't a little too urban in this case. So trying to find another space to get that cross section as outlined in the Plan West Ashley. I think would be, if this is to be a model of that tremendous effort, then perhaps we ought to be reflective of the street sections that we've put so much hours and energy and thought into. And the multi-use path is part of that, but the other part of that is the relationship from the building face to the curb in that public zone. So I'm with you, Dinos, and kudos to Nathan. I think the architecture is really interesting and has evolved nicely. And now it's more about how the building interacts with the street and sidewalks and the curbs, which we've been talking about for some time now.
Yeah, I think Katie, excuse me, if I can be so informal since it's so late, that both James and Katie really make great points in that regard. And the older I get, the more space I need when I'm riding my bike too. So I mean, I think Plan West Ashley had delineated a very good and thoughtful concept. I see no reason as a board that we should not comply and apply those terms directly to all of the development that's going in over here.
I agree.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything that Dinos, you and Jeff have said so far. I think the project has evolved so nicely, but I think the one piece that we've had kind of a question on throughout the different meetings is the streetscape along St. Andrews. I think we've talked about how the project fits into Plan West Ashley, but thank you to Katie Zimmerman for finally bringing us that one specific dimension that's recommended in the plan, because I think we've asked, but I don't think we've gotten that information until today. And so I agree. I think everything else, looks great on the project. I think that's one thing that I agree with you, Dinos, that we should be included in part of our motion.
Well, it's hard to, as someone mentioned, I hate to even go this route, but really without understanding the building placement relationship to the boundaries of the site, it's hard to accurately assess or give approval for height, scale, or mass. I think general architectural direction, I think we're all in line with, but this scale becomes at issue with this relationship, and maybe I'm out of line there with that thinking. But I'd love to hear somebody who does site planning for a living maybe speak into that.
This Andy. Yeah, I agree. And I think that I've mentioned before, looking at these looking at these plans, it's always kind of axiomatic that if something seems small on a plan, when you get out there in real life, it's going to be even smaller. I think these spaces we're talking about, the best comment I can make about them is claustrophobic. I think that all of the things going.
Andy, I think we lost you.
Andy, you're cutting out.
You're not muted, but I can't hear you, Andy.
Andy, we can't hear you. I don't think he realizes we can't hear him quite yet.
Andy, we can't hear you.
Out of battery.
Anyone else have any other comments?
I was just going to say, in reading Andy's lips, I think that he was probably moving forward with the comment.
Yeah. Can y'all hear me now?
Yep.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, I don't know what happened there. Anyways, I agree with what y'all saying. I don't know where I left off or dropped off, but
I'm sure it was eloquent and to the point.
Yeah, that'd be a first. The only thing I was kind of saying there at the end is that from an overall standpoint, I do think that the landscape palette itself is evolving quite well. I do want to, I believe it was Mr. Ward that suggested studying how the trees relate to the building and the sidewalk placement. I do really suggest a study of the species of the trees, especially these street trees along St. Andrews Boulevard. What's being suggested in the palette is going to be growing into the, they're spreading trees. They're going to grow into the building. And even again on Chase Street, I think that some of those species really need to be studied, especially with the space that's there now. I don't think they're going to do very well. Overall, I just think I echo what my board comrades have said. I think the study of the placement and the spaces around the building, I think this has been a reoccurring theme for us on this building, need some serious work.
Also, I just wanted to say that Jeff brought up a really good comment about the trees on St. Andrews, whether the utilities underneath the street would even allow for those trees to exist there. I guess that's kind of a huge impact on the look and the face of the entire building if those trees can't exist, or that size tree can't exist.
I have a comment.
I think we're
Was that Mr. Harper?
It is.
If we're speaking with us being in board discussion, if there's anything that we're stating that is inaccurate, you're welcome to speak, but otherwise, unfortunately, with just procedural, we're not able to receive feedback otherwise.
So I'd like to speak to a potential inaccuracy.
Perfect. Okay, thank you.
So what Ms. Zimmerman said earlier about the path, am I wrong in stating that that's in the right of way, not on private property?
I don't know specifically how it's worded in Plan West Ashley.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
that is what the diagram in Plan West Ashley shows, is a 10-foot path in the existing 100-foot right of way.
Okay, does that right of way, what is currently shown with parking and bike lanes?
Correct.
Okay.
So I'd like to finish my point too, if I may.
Pardon, what was that?
I said I'd like to finish my point if I may.
Okay.
So that's, if Mr. Pullman's correct, that's in a right of way. That's not on private property. And here we are in our fourth appearance before this humble board. We have attempted on numerous occasions to collaborate with Charleston Moves. I'd happy to share emails, phone conversations, etc. And so the board's prepared to make a ruling tonight on something that's obviously perhaps not even on our property. And it's the first time it's been pointed out to us in 4 hearings. And months and months of work into this. And here we are now, after talking about stormwater, after talking about kitchen venting. So anyway, just, I do believe that the bike path being in the right of way is potentially something that is not directly dealing with our private property.
Understood. And thank you, Eric, for clarifying that as well. I'm sure the board knows, but Eric's on staff with the city on the West Ashley. I forget exactly what your title is, Eric, but on the West Ashley revitalization staff person. Is that a fair statement?
That's a good job description. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. All right, back to board discussion.
Yeah, may I, in all fairness to the board, I mean, we received dimensions. We know that the first 2 applications were denied. The third one was deferred, and now we have asked for, we received dimensions on the site plan. And I don't know if this is so much an issue dealing necessarily with the right of way. And again, my fellow board members may disagree, but I think this is an architectural and site planning comments that we're making, not necessarily throwing the responsibility back to the city, but the sense as the building. And we have said this before, I know in other meetings, that the building has been hugging the street very closely. And the idea that we can correct the issues now as we go forward, and as I think as Councilman Shade commented, that this is going to be the precedence and set the model for everything forthcoming, and it's so close. There is just some more tweaking, and I'm not advocating a deferral or an approval at this point in time. I'm just simply saying that as a design element, getting some more space in there is between the curb and the building would be a great asset to this project. I'm like Jeff, I might defer again to Andy from a landscape standpoint as to his comments, and Jeff as well, and Kristen, but it gets so tight right there at that corner where the building comes near the bridal shop. And then again, as you venture backwards toward Ackerman Park, it gets so tight back there.
I mean, from my standpoint, it's not really, whether this bike lane is, or this 10-foot width or whatever we're talking about is required in the right of way. I'm thinking about how the space will feel when you're actually in it. And it's going to feel like this building's trying to push you out into St. Andrews Boulevard with the height and mass of this building. You're in, you can look along the front of it. There's nothing that brings that building down to the scale of a person. And then you've got these trees that are going to be growing into the building. You're really going to feel like you're walking through a construction tunnel. And I do think this is something we have discussed in previous meetings. And
Yeah, and in all fairness to the board, I think that comment was made on March 15th, when we asked for dimensions as far as the engineered site plan was concerned, so we could
Yeah.
understand what those setbacks were.
so, I mean, it just is going to feel claustrophobic.
What do you recommend?
I feel like they need to give more room to the public realm.
Can you go back to the site plan for a moment, David? So that we can see. I mean,
This one okay?
that one's fine. Yeah. Nathan, may I ask you a question? Madam Chair, may I ask the applicant a question?
Yes, thank you.
Nathan, on Ackerman Park, the white line that you're showing, is that the property line or the setback line?
So it is the property line.
That's the property line. And is there are we as close to the setback as we possibly can be? Or is it
Essentially, there is no setback there, Dinos.
Okay.
There's a couple of easements that we have to stay out of, but we've worked that, and we've worked closely with DRC with proximity to existing trees and some other elements.
I am. And when you go to the corner of Chase on the north, I guess maybe that's the northwest corner up there of the building. Can you blow into, I'm pointing again. Can you blow into the corner of the proposed structure right at Chase Street where it makes the turn towards Sycamore? David, thank you, my friend.
Madam Chair, this is Michael Harper again. I've got one more clarification / inaccuracy I'd like to address at some point too.
Dina, so do you want to finish your thought first, or are we
No,
okay?
that's Mr. Harper can go forward. I was just looking.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Well, we're just obviously, our wheels are spinning here on what we're hearing. And I know, we've got a landscape architect commenting on a few things, but it looks like in the West Ashley plan, there are a couple of different recommendations for walkways. One of them is a 5-foot walkway for Plan West Ashley. So just wanted to point that out to the board.
Okay, thank you. Enos, do you have any other questions or thoughts?
No, I think I've probably expressed everything to the greatest extent possible. I truly do applaud the architect for the continuing evolution, and I know that they're working within the constraints that they have been given, and quite candidly, that perspective that you show off Ackerman Park, which I think is one of the next to last slides that's in the presentation, is a wonderful architectural statement that will provide a wonderful model. I think, unlike other members of the board, possibly that I'm just struggling with the setbacks as everybody else is right now. I'm studying the plan in more detail for a moment just to see if there's anything else that I really have no other comments. I think I'm probably just repeating myself now.
Any other comments or motion?
This is tough.
Let me see if I can.
I do want to say that staff's comment number 4 does touch on a little bit of what we're talking about with connectivity along Chase Street and St. Andrews per the West Ashley plan. Which we're getting, some different information on.
Well, I guess to kind of pick up on what Andy was saying, that if I had my druthers, I would like to see the front of the building pushed back from St. Andrews another 5 or 10 feet. I don't what it just feels a little tight to the street. If there were no other issues in play.
And I agree. I think that that's the key issue right there. I'm just looking at those, and I think everybody is basically, the city has said it. Now, the question I guess that I have is it an issue that warrants a deferral, or is it an issue that is an item under conceptual approval with the demand that we pick up another 5 feet for the
frontage?
Yeah, for the frontage, for the sidewalk.
Especially on the side. Are we still in board discussion? Sorry.
We are.
Okay, that the side where the bridal part, that seems to be the angle of the building versus the street, just gets very, very tight in there. That would be the biggest benefit to them on that side.
Mm-hmm.
Would be widened or give another 5 feet.
Mm-hmm. And that is in direct response to massing in scale as it relates to St. Andrews.
Well, considering that from an architectural standpoint, the building has progressed wonderfully. From a landscape standpoint, overall concept, the project has progressed. Looking at the motion that we had with regards to the deferral a couple of months ago, I think that we are well within our right to now, with the additional information that was requested, to ask that that the building, I guess, let me ask you this, Jeff. We are basically, we want a minimum of 10 feet of a sidewalk. if we already have, what, 5 feet in width?
Well, that would satisfy the multimodal sidewalk width,
Mhm.
10 feet. So that would be an additional 5.5 feet.
Mhm. So I guess I want to pose something to just for the board to see what y'all's thoughts are. If we move for a conceptual approval with board comment that that the building that along St. Andrews Boulevard, that a minimum of 10 feet of sidewalk be provided to include the landscaping. I mean, excuse me,
What's your-
to exclude the landscaping. In other words, I'm trying to get 10 feet of width. So
10 feet
that as,
sidewalk. Well,
yeah.
you could achieve that by eliminating the verge.
I just like the.
Which I don't think is, I mean, I don't think that's a good,
All right.
Yeah.
I don't think the verge should be eliminated.
Right.
Yeah, I would.
Unless some alternative is presented, I think the landscaping is important. Like I said, I don't think those are the trees to put there, but
I think that's fair, Dinos. I mean, that's essentially what staff was recommending.
Okay.
I mean, they didn't use the 10 feet, but they were asking for that to be planned and coordinated.
as long as we're coming back, it's not one of those things, oh, we studied it, we can't accomplish it, that we understand that this is a hard line for
Yeah,
us.
well, I mean, that would be the motion. The motion would be a conceptual approval with board comment that we increase the sidewalk along St. Andrews Boulevard to 10 feet, still maintaining the verge that is along St. Andrews Boulevard. So in essence, if the verge is, I don't know, how wide is the verge?
4 feet.
4 feet. So basically we would want a minimum of 14 feet.
From back a curve to the.
Yeah.
To include the verge.
I could support that with an additional comment to restudy the placement and width of the landscape along Chase Street.
Great.
And the tree choice, you saying that as well, Andy, the tree choice on St. Andrews?
That study the tree choices along the Chase and St. Andrews Boulevard. That's something I could support.
Kristen, Jeff, how do y'all feel?
Feel good with that?
I feel good with it.
Okay. I'll never repeat that motion again, but let me.
I'll repeat it for you, and then you can tell me if I got it right, Dinos.
Please, thank you.
We have a motion. Hold on, back up 1 second, Dinos. Do you want to include any of the staff comments?
Oh, yes. I had staff comments 3 and 4.
1, 3, 4.
What about 2, Dinos?
Oh, I had scratched number 2.
Okay, sorry. So
David had scratched through that one. That's right.
okay, so we have a motion for conceptual approval with staff comments 3 and 4, along with board comments 1, to increase the sidewalk along St. Andrews to 10 feet while still maintaining the 4-foot verge. 2, restudy the placement and width restudy the placement along Chase Street of street trees. Was that right?
Well, placement and width of the sidewalk along Chase
Thank
Street.
you, of sidewalk. I missed that part. So number 2 was restudy the placement and width of the sidewalk along Chase Street. And 3, to study the street tree species. Does that
Along
cover
both
those?
both along St. Andrews and Chase Street.
Yeah, and I would assume street trees would cover all the street trees, because those were the two main ones, right? Only
Yeah.
two street trees. Okay. Does that cover it, Dinos?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And is there a second?
This Andy, I'll second.
Okay. I will now call roll. Jeff,
Jeff in favor.
Kristen,
In favor?
and then I am also yes in favor. Thank you very much. We are now moving on to item number 4, approval of minutes from the May 17th, 2021 meeting. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Andy
Sandy.
made the motion. Who, is there a second?
Second.
Kristen made the second. I'll now call roll. Jeff,
In favor.
Dinos,
Yes, ma'am, in favor.
and I am also yes in favor, and we are all through.
That was interesting. Are we on recording now?
No, we're still live with attendees and recording.
Well, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
And a sign off. Have a good night, everyone.
Good night.
too.
Thank
Yeah.
you all.
Bye-bye.
A long one for short.